One missed call, one death, one empire falling apart. The night Salvatore Moretti signed a multi-million-dollar criminal deal, his pregnant wife called 11 times. He ignored every single one. By the time he listened to the hospital voicemail, she was already dead. Their premature son survived, barely. And waiting beside her body was a letter that destroyed everything he thought he knew about himself. Now he's fighting to keep his son while his empire crumbles and enemies circle like wolves. Will he choose power or redemption before it's too late? Like this video and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Stay until the end.
That's so much as sitting.
The rain came down like nails against the restaurant windows. Salvatore Moretti sat across from Dante Valieri in a private dining room that cost more per hour than most people earned in a month. The room smelled like expensive cigars and older money. Salvatore's whiskey sat untouched. Ice melted slowly into amber liquid while Dante talked about territory expansion, profit margins, and the kind of violence that kept empires intact. Salvatore's phone vibrated for the 7th time. He glanced at the screen. Serafina. Again. Dante noticed. His eyes flicked toward the phone, then back to Salvatore's face. The older man smiled, but there was nothing warm in it, just calculation. Your wife? Yeah. She calls a lot. Salvatore silenced the phone and turned it face down on the table. She worries. Pregnant women do that. Dante leaned back in his chair, swirling his own whiskey. Word around the families is you've gone soft since the wedding. They're saying marriage makes men weak, that babies turn wolves into house pets. Salvatore's jaw tightened. People say a lot of things. They do. Dante pushed a leather folder across the table. Inside were contracts, shipping routes, distribution networks, names of politicians, judges, and police captains who could be bought or buried. This is what separates the players from the pretenders, Salvatore. One signature. You inherit the entire East Coast operation. $60 million annually, more power than your father ever dreamed of touching. The phone vibrated again. 8th call. Dante's smile widened. Or you can go home and hold your wife's hand while she complains about swollen ankles. Salvatore stared at the contracts. Everything he'd worked toward for 15 years sat inside that folder. Respect, fear, control. The kind of empire that made politicians nervous and rivals disappear. His father had died chasing this level of power and never reached it. Now it was being handed to Salvatore on a silver platter. All it required was one signature, and ignoring one more phone call. She's 8 months pregnant, Salvatore said quietly. High risk. Doctors told her to stay off her feet. Then she should be resting. Dante tapped the folder. Not bothering you during business. Salvatore picked up his phone. 9 missed calls now. He stared at Serafina's name on the screen. She knew better than to call during meetings. She knew how important tonight was, unless something was wrong. But if something was really wrong, she would have called 911, right? She was probably just anxious, hormonal, scared about the delivery next month. Serafina had been increasingly emotional lately, crying over commercials and picking fights about him working too much. It was normal pregnancy behavior. The doctors had said so. He put the phone back down. Smart man. Dante slid a pen across the table. Your father would be proud. Salvatore took the pen. It was heavy, Italian-made, expensive. The kind of pen that signed death warrants and business deals with equal ease. He opened the folder and scanned the first page. Standard organized crime boilerplate disguised as import-export agreements. Plausible deniability wrapped in corporate language. His phone vibrated. 10th call. Dante's expression hardened. Salvatore. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're not sure what you want. I'm sure. Then prove it. Dante leaned forward. Sign the papers, build the empire, or go home and let someone else inherit what you're too weak to claim. Salvatore's hand tightened around the pen. Too weak. The words crawled under his skin like insects. His entire life had been about proving he wasn't weak. Proving he was harder than his father, smarter than his competitors, ruthless enough to survive in a world where mercy got you killed. Serafina would understand. She married him knowing what he was, knowing what he did. She didn't like it, but she accepted it. That was the deal. She got the penthouse, the security, the lifestyle. He got to build something that mattered. He signed the first page, then the second, then the third. Dante watched with satisfaction as Salvatore moved through the contracts, initialing margins and signing signature lines. Each page represented another piece of the empire. Shipping routes through Newark, distribution channels in Boston, protection rackets in Philadelphia. By the time he finished, Salvatore controlled criminal infrastructure worth hundreds of millions. It was 1:47 a.m. when he signed the final page. Dante raised his glass. To the new king of the East Coast, Salvatore's phone vibrated. 11th call. This time, it kept ringing. Serafina never called more than 3 times unless it was an emergency. 11 calls meant something was wrong. Seriously wrong. Dante's smile faded. You going to answer that? Salvatore grabbed the phone and stood up. I have to go. We're not finished celebrating. I have to go. Salvatore was already moving toward the door. He answered the call while pushing through the restaurant. Serafina? But it wasn't Serafina's voice. It was a nurse. Mr. Moretti? This is St. Catherine's Hospital. Your wife was brought in by ambulance approximately 90 minutes ago. She's in critical condition. The baby... Salvatore didn't hear the rest. He was already running. The rain hit him like a wall when he burst through the restaurant doors. His car was parked 3 blocks away. He sprinted through puddles and traffic, dodging taxis and ignoring crosswalks. Water soaked through his suit. His shoes slipped on wet pavement. None of it mattered. 90 minutes ago. That was around the 4th or 5th call. She'd been calling from the hospital, and he'd ignored her. St. Catherine's was 15 minutes away in normal traffic. Salvatore made it in 8, running red lights and cutting through back streets with the kind of reckless speed that would have gotten anyone else arrested. But cops didn't pull over cars with his license plates. They knew better. He abandoned the car in the emergency bay and ran inside, still dripping rainwater across the sterile white floors. Serafina Moretti, he gasped at the front desk. My wife. She was brought in, 4th floor, labor and delivery. The receptionist's expression was carefully neutral, too neutral. Elevators on your left. Salvatore took the stairs 3 at a time. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. He didn't care. He just needed to see her. Needed to know she was okay. Needed to apologize for not answering the phone. The 4th floor was too quiet. No crying babies, no excited families, just dim hallway lighting and the antiseptic smell of hospital-grade cleaners. A nurse saw him coming, and her expression confirmed what Salvatore already knew deep in his chest. He was too late. Mr. Moretti? She approached carefully, like he was something dangerous, which he was. I'm so sorry. We did everything we could, but the placental abruption was too severe. Your wife lost too much blood. She coded twice in the ambulance. We managed to save the baby, but where is she? Sir, maybe you should sit. Where is she? The nurse flinched. Then she led him down the hallway to a room at the end. The door was closed. Through the window, Salvatore could see a figure on the bed covered by a white sheet. Too still. Too quiet. Too final. He pushed through the door. Serafina looked like she was sleeping. Her face was pale but peaceful. Someone had cleaned the blood away and arranged her hair nicely across the pillow. Her hand rested on her chest, wedding ring still in place. She could have been napping, except she wasn't breathing. Salvatore stood frozen in the doorway. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. He'd just seen her that morning. She'd been complaining about back pain and asking him to pick up groceries on the way home. He'd promised he would. Then he'd gone to the meeting with Dante and forgotten about everything except the contracts. Mr. Moretti? Another voice. A doctor this time. Your son is in the NICU. He was born at 32 weeks, so he's premature, but his vitals are stable. Would you like to see him? Salvatore couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what was happening. There's also... The doctor hesitated. Your wife left something for you. He placed an envelope on the bedside table. It was sealed. Serafina's handwriting on the front. For Salvatore. When it's too late. The doctor left quietly. The nurse followed. Salvatore was alone with his dead wife and an envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He picked it up with shaking hands. Inside were 3 pages written in Serafina's careful script. She'd taken her time with this. Every letter was deliberate, every word chosen precisely. This wasn't a goodbye note written in panic. This was something she'd been preparing for weeks, maybe months. Salvatore started reading. By the second paragraph, he wished he hadn't. Gunshot. The letter was merciless. Serafina documented everything, every missed dinner, every broken promise, every time Salvatore said he'd be home early and didn't show up until dawn. She listed dates, times, specific conversations where he'd chosen business over their marriage. March 14th, you promised to come to the ultrasound. I waited in the parking lot for 45 minutes before going in alone. You texted 3 hours later saying Dante needed you for an emergency meeting. There's always an emergency, Salvatore. Always something more important than us. April 2nd, I told you the doctor was worried about my blood pressure. You said you'd come to the next appointment. You didn't. You sent flowers instead. Like flowers fix anything. May 18th, I called you 11 times because I was bleeding and terrified. You didn't answer. I had to call my sister to take me to the hospital. They said I almost lost the baby. When you finally came home, you smelled like whiskey and told me I was overreacting. The words kept coming. Page after page of evidence that Salvatore had been failing her for months. Years, maybe. He just hadn't noticed because he was too busy building an empire he'd convinced himself was for their future. But the worst part came at the end. I don't trust you anymore, Salvatore. I don't trust you to put our son first. I don't trust you to be there when he needs you. So I've prepared custody papers and a restraining order. If something happens to me, they'll make sure you can't do to our son what you did to me. Make him wait for a father who never shows up. You were given chances. You didn't take them. I hope you can live with that. Salvatore read the letter 3 times. Each time the words cut deeper. Each time he wanted to argue with her, to defend himself, to explain that everything he did was for them. But the explanations died in his throat because Serafina was right. About all of it. He'd chosen Dante's meeting over her phone calls. He'd signed contracts while she was bleeding out in an ambulance. He'd built an empire on the foundation of a crumbling marriage and told himself it would be worth it someday. Now, someday was here, and his wife was dead. Salvatore folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. His hands weren't shaking anymore. He felt numb, hollowed out, like someone had reached inside his chest and removed everything that made him human. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Mr. Moretti? The doctor again. Your son is awake. Would you like to meet him? Salvatore followed the doctor down another hallway into the NICU. The room was full of incubators, each one containing a tiny baby fighting to survive. Machines beeped. Monitors displayed vital signs. Nurses moved between stations with practiced efficiency. The doctor stopped at an incubator in the corner. This is Luca. Inside the clear plastic box was the smallest human being Salvatore had ever seen. Luca was barely bigger than his hand. Tubes ran into his nose and mouth. Wires connected to his chest monitored his heart rate. His skin was red and translucent. His eyes were closed. He's breathing on his own, the doctor explained. That's a good sign. Premature babies his age often need ventilators. Luca's a fighter. Salvatore stared at his son. He was supposed to feel something, wasn't he? Some instant connection, some overwhelming wave of paternal love. That's what people always talked about. How the moment you see your child, everything changes. But Salvatore felt nothing. Just the same hollow emptiness that had been growing inside him since he'd read Serafina's letter. Can I... His voice cracked. Can I touch him? Of course. The doctor opened a small porthole in the incubator. Just be gentle. Salvatore reached inside. His hand looked massive compared to Luca's fragile body. He touched the baby's arm with one finger. The skin was impossibly soft, warm, alive. Luca's tiny hand wrapped around Salvatore's finger. The grip was weak but determined, like the baby was holding on for dear life. Holding on because he didn't have anyone else. Because his mother was dead and his father was a criminal who'd missed his birth while signing contracts in a restaurant. Salvatore stood there for a long time, his finger trapped in his son's grip, trying to feel something other than guilt. He failed. The funeral happened 3 days later. Serafina's family wanted a small ceremony. just close relatives and friends. They didn't want Salvatore's business associates there. They especially didn't want Dante Valieri anywhere near the service. Salvatore agreed to everything. He had no leverage to argue, no moral ground to stand on. Serafina's parents barely looked at him during the ceremony. Her sister Celeste stared at him with open hatred. After the burial, Celeste cornered him in the cemetery parking lot. "This is your fault," she said. Her voice was steady, cold, more dangerous than any threat Salvatore had received from rival criminals. "My sister died waiting for you to give a damn, and now you're going to raise that baby? He's my son. You don't deserve him." "Maybe not." Salvatore met her eyes. "But he's still mine." "We'll see about that." Celeste turned away. "My lawyer will be in touch." She left him standing alone beside his car. Rain started falling again. Salvatore got in and sat in the driver's seat, not starting the engine, just staring through the windshield at the cemetery where his wife was buried. His phone buzzed. "Dante. How was the funeral?" Salvatore almost didn't answer, but old habits died hard. "Fine." "Good. We need to talk about the Philadelphia expansion. There's resistance from the local crews. We need to send a message." "Not now, Dante." "Salvatore, I understand you're grieving, but business doesn't stop for funerals. The empire needs leadership. The families are watching to see if you're still strong enough to hold what we built." "I said not now." "Then when? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're falling apart, and weak leaders get replaced." The threat was subtle but clear. Dante had given Salvatore an empire, and Dante could take it away. That's how the organization worked. Power flowed to whoever was strong enough to hold it. Salvatore hung up. Then he turned off the phone completely and drove to St. Catherine's Hospital to visit his son. Botic. The NICU became Salvatore's refuge. He spent hours sitting beside Luca's incubator, watching the baby sleep and occasionally opening the porthole to let Luca grip his finger. The nurses got used to seeing him there. They stopped trying to make small talk after the first few days. Luca was getting stronger, breathing better, gaining weight. The doctor said he might be able to go home in a few weeks if he kept improving. Home. Salvatore hadn't been back to the penthouse since the funeral. He'd been staying in hotels and sleeping at the hospital when exhaustion forced him to rest. The thought of walking into the apartment he'd shared with Serafina made his chest tight. But Luca would need somewhere to live. So Salvatore finally went home. The penthouse looked exactly how he'd left it. Serafina's coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter. Her book was open on the couch. The nursery she'd spent months preparing was finished but empty. Pale blue walls, a crib that had never been used, a changing table stocked with diapers and wipes. Everything ready for a baby who'd been born too early and a mother who'd never come home. Salvatore stood in the nursery doorway. The room smelled like fresh paint and new furniture. Serafina had picked everything herself. She'd shown him pictures and asked his opinion, but he'd been too busy to really look, too distracted by territory disputes and profit margins. Now the nursery felt like a museum, a monument to all the moments he'd missed. His phone buzzed. He'd turned it back on during the drive home. Dante again. "We need to meet, tonight." Salvatore typed back. "I'm busy." "This isn't optional. 8 o'clock, the usual place." Salvatore stared at the message, then at the empty nursery, then back at the phone. The old Salvatore would have gone to the meeting without question. Business always came first. The empire required constant maintenance, constant attention, constant sacrifice. But the old Salvatore's wife was dead, and his son was alone in a hospital because his father had prioritized contracts over phone calls. "Can't make it," Salvatore typed. "Family emergency." Dante's response came fast. "Your family is dead, Salvatore. Get your head straight and be at the meeting." Salvatore read the message 3 times. Each word was like a punch to the gut. Cold, calculated, true. His family was dead, except for Luca. And if Salvatore went to that meeting, he'd be proving Serafina right, proving that business would always come first, that his son would grow up the same way Serafina died, waiting for a father who never showed up. He turned off the phone again. Then he went back to the hospital. Bulky. Weeks passed. Luca came home. The penthouse transformed from a sterile museum into something messier and more alive. Diapers. Bottles. A baby monitor that chirped every time Luca moved. Salvatore hired a night nurse because he didn't know how to handle the 2 a.m. feedings or the crying that seemed to last for hours. The nurse's name was Rosa. She was in her 50s, efficient, and didn't ask questions about Salvatore's import business. She moved into the guest room and took over most of the baby care while Salvatore tried to figure out what came next. Dante kept calling. Salvatore kept ignoring him. The empire didn't stop. Meetings happened without him. Deals moved forward. Territory expanded. Salvatore received daily reports from his lieutenants, but he stopped going to the warehouse, stopped attending sit-downs with other families, stopped doing anything except staring at his son and wondering how to be a father. Luca was 3 months old when Celeste filed for custody. The court summons arrived by courier. Inside was a thick legal document outlining all the reasons Salvatore Moretti was unfit to raise a child. It cited his criminal associations, his lack of parenting skills, the fact that a hired nurse was doing all the actual childcare while Salvatore collected reports from an organized crime network. And attached to the filing was Serafina's letter, the one where she documented every failure, every broken promise, every moment Salvatore had chosen business over family. Celeste was using his dead wife's words against him, and the worst part was, they were all true. Salvatore called his attorney. They met at a coffee shop far from the penthouse, far from anywhere Dante's people might notice. Can she win? Salvatore asked. His attorney, Marcus, was blunt. Probably. You're involved in organized crime. You have no real relationship with the child. A nurse is raising him while you manage criminal operations. From a judge's perspective, the boy would be better off with his aunt. What can I do? Get out of the life. Build a relationship with your son. Prove you're more than what this letter says you are. Marcus tapped the custody filing. Or fight it with money and connections. Bury her in legal fees until she gives up. The old Salvatore would have chosen the second option. Money and connections had solved every problem he'd ever faced. Judges could be bought. Lawyers could be intimidated. Celeste could be crushed under the weight of legal warfare until she had no choice but to surrender. But that was exactly what Serafina had predicted he would do. Exactly the kind of man she'd died believing him to be. I'll fight it, Salvatore said quietly. But not that way. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Then how? I don't know yet. What? The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 months later. That gave Salvatore 90 days to prove he was worth keeping his son. He started small. Rosa taught him how to change diapers properly, how to test bottle temperature, how to burp a baby without dropping him. Basic skills that most parents learn naturally, but Salvatore had to study like they were criminal statutes. He was terrible at all of it. The first time he tried to change Luca alone, the baby peed on him. The first time he made a bottle, it was too hot and burned Luca's mouth. The first time he tried putting Luca down for a nap, the baby cried for 2 hours straight until Rosa finally intervened. But Salvatore kept trying. He started attending pediatrician appointments, sitting in the waiting room with other parents who looked exhausted but happy. He didn't fit in. They talked about playdates and mommy groups while Salvatore checked his phone for updates about territory disputes and shipment delays, but he showed up. He also started pulling away from the empire, slowly at first, missing a meeting here, delegating a decision there. His lieutenants covered for him initially, but Dante noticed. You're disappearing, Dante said during one of their increasingly rare phone calls. People are asking questions. Let them ask. Salvatore, this isn't sustainable. You can't run an empire part-time. Either you're in or you're out. I'm handling it. No, you're not. You're falling apart. And if you can't hold your territory, someone else will. The threat was explicit now. Dante wasn't offering support anymore. He was issuing an ultimatum. Salvatore hung up. Then he went back to the penthouse, where Rosa was feeding Luca in the nursery. The 6-month-old was starting to grab at things, starting to smile, starting to develop a personality that had nothing to do with criminal empires or territory disputes. Mr. Moretti? Rosa looked up from the feeding. Is everything okay? Yeah. Salvatore sat down in the rocking chair across from her. Can you teach me how to do that? Rosa smiled. Of course. She handed him the bottle and positioned Luca in his arms. The baby felt heavier than before, sturdier. like he was actually growing into a real person instead of just a fragile collection of tubes and monitors. Support his head, Rosa instructed. Angle the bottle so he doesn't swallow air. If he stops sucking, he's probably full. Salvatore followed her directions carefully. Luca drank from the bottle, his tiny hand wrapping around Salvatore's finger, the same grip he'd had in the NICU. Still weak, but determined. "You're doing great," Rosa said. Salvatore didn't feel great. He felt clumsy and uncertain and terrified of dropping his son. But Luca was eating, and that was something. Small victories. That's what his life had become. Small victories in a war he was losing on every other front. 6 months after Serafina's death, Salvatore attended his first parent group at the local community center. Rosa had suggested it, a way to meet other parents and learn from people who actually knew what they were doing. The group met in a basement room that smelled like coffee and baby powder. 15 parents sat in a circle, passing infants back and forth, while discussing teething and sleep schedules and the best brands of formula. Salvatore sat in the back and said nothing. The group leader, a cheerful woman named Patricia, tried to include him. "And you are?" "Salvatore." "Welcome, Salvatore. How old is your baby?" 6 months. "Wonderful. Is this your first?" "Yeah." "And where's Mom today?" The room went quiet. Salvatore saw Rosa tense beside him. She knew the answer. Everyone else was about to find out. "She died," Salvatore said flatly. "During delivery." Patricia's smile faltered. "Oh, I'm so sorry. That must be incredibly difficult." "It is." The conversation moved on quickly. Nobody wanted to dwell on death in a room full of new parents celebrating life. But Salvatore felt their eyes on him for the rest of the meeting. The widower. The single father. The man who clearly didn't belong. After the meeting, one of the other fathers approached him in the parking lot. Young guy, probably late 20s, wedding ring, friendly expression. "Hey man, I just wanted to say, what you're doing is brave. Raising a kid alone after losing your wife, that's real strength." Salvatore looked at him. "You don't know anything about me." The guy blinked. "I just meant..." "I know what you meant." Salvatore buckled Luca into his car seat. "But you're wrong. There's nothing brave about showing up. It's just what you do." He drove away before the conversation could continue. Rosa was quiet during the ride home. Finally, she said, "You were rude to that man." "I know. He was trying to be kind." "I know that too." "Then why?" "Because he's wrong." Salvatore gripped the steering wheel. "I'm not brave. I'm barely holding it together. And every time someone tells me I'm doing a great job, all I can think about is how my wife died, believing I'd fail at exactly this." Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then, "But you haven't failed. Not yet. Not ever. You're here. You're learning. You're trying. That's more than a lot of fathers do." Salvatore didn't respond. He didn't believe her. Showing up wasn't enough. Serafina had made that clear in her letter. She'd wanted a husband who prioritized family over business, a father who would be present instead of absent, a partner who answered the phone when she needed him. Salvatore had been none of those things, and now he was scrambling to become them while his empire fell apart and enemies circled closer. The custody hearing was 2 weeks away when Dante finally showed up at the penthouse. Salvatore was reading to Luca, a picture book about trains that the baby seemed to enjoy, when the doorbell rang. Rosa answered it, her voice carried from the entryway, sharp with concern. "Mr. Moretti isn't taking visitors." "He'll take me." Dante walked into the nursery like he owned the place. Expensive suit, perfectly groomed, the smile that never reached his eyes. "Nice setup," Dante said, looking around. "Very domestic." Salvatore carefully placed Luca in his crib. The baby started fussing immediately, reaching for the book. Salvatore handed it back to him. Luca grabbed it and promptly put the corner in his mouth. "What do you want, Dante?" "To see how the mighty have fallen." Dante leaned against the doorframe. 6 months ago, you controlled the East Coast. Now you're playing house with a baby who doesn't even know who you are. Get out." "Not yet." Dante's smile faded. "We need to talk about what comes next." "There's nothing to talk about. Wrong. There's everything to talk about. You abandoned the empire, Salvatore. Left it leaderless while you pretended to be a family man. Do you have any idea how much money we've lost? How many territories we've given up? How weak we look to every other family in the network? I don't care. You should, because weakness gets punished, and right now you're making all of us weak. Salvatore turned to face him. So punish me. Take the empire, do whatever you want, but leave my son out of it. Dante laughed. You think you can just walk away? That's not how this works. You signed contracts, Salvatore, made commitments, built relationships. You don't get to abandon all of that because your wife died. Watch me. I did watch you. For 6 months, I watched you spiral into irrelevance. And now I'm done watching. Dante straightened his jacket. You have 2 choices. Come back and run the empire properly, or step aside and let someone competent take over. But you don't get to keep one foot in both worlds. I choose my son. Then you lose everything else. Fine. Dante studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, if that's how you want to play it. He left without another word. Rosa appeared in the doorway moments later, her face pale. Mr. Moretti, what just happened? I made a choice. Salvatore picked up Luca and held him close. The baby squirmed but didn't cry. Just grabbed Salvatore's shirt and held on. What kind of choice? The kind there's no coming back from. Suolto. 2 days before the custody hearing, federal agents raided 3 of Salvatore's warehouses. The operation was coordinated, simultaneous raids across New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Agents seized shipments, arrested low-level workers, and confiscated financial records that traced directly back to the empire's leadership. Salvatore's attorney called him at 6 in the morning. We've got a problem. How bad? Career ending. The feds have everything. Names, routes, transactions. Someone gave them a complete map of your organization. Salvatore already knew who. Dante. Probably. He's positioning himself to take over while you burn. Classic hostile takeover, criminal edition. What are my options? Cooperate with the feds. Trade information for immunity. Disappear into witness protection with your son. Or fight it. Tie them up in court for years. Burn through your remaining resources until there's nothing left. Neither option was good. But one of them meant Luca would grow up watching his father go to prison. The other meant Luca would grow up without the wealth and connections that came from the empire. Salvatore made his decision in less than 5 seconds. Set up a meeting with the federal prosecutor, Gatz. The custody hearing happened exactly as scheduled. Celeste's lawyers presented their case first. They brought photographs of Rosa doing all the child care, bank records showing Salvatore's continued income from criminal enterprises, witness testimony from neighbors who'd never seen Salvatore take Luca to the park or push him in a stroller, and they brought Serafina's letter. The lawyer read it aloud in the courtroom. Every word, every accusation, every moment of failure documented in Serafina's careful handwriting. You were given chances. You didn't take them. The judge listened without expression. When Celeste's side finished, she turned to Salvatore's attorney. Your response? Marcus stood. Your Honor, my client doesn't dispute the contents of that letter. 6 months ago, he was exactly the man his late wife described. But people change, and Salvatore Moretti has spent every day since his wife's death trying to become the father his son deserves. He presented evidence. Pediatrician records showing Salvatore's attendance at every appointment. Receipts from parent groups and baby classes. Photographs of Salvatore feeding Luca, changing diapers, reading bedtime stories. It wasn't much, but it was real. Then Marcus played his final card. Mr. Moretti has also recently cooperated with federal authorities to dismantle the organized crime network he was previously associated with. As of this morning, he has signed immunity agreements in exchange for testimony against multiple high-ranking criminals. He has severed all ties to that world. The courtroom erupted. Celeste's lawyer objected. The judge called for order. Salvatore sat quietly through all of it. He'd traded his empire for a chance at keeping his son. And he still didn't know if it would be enough. The judge reviewed the evidence for what felt like hours. Finally, she looked up. This court recognizes that Mr. Moretti has made significant efforts to change his life, However, the transition has been recent and dramatic. The child's best interest must be the primary concern. Salvatore's chest tightened. Therefore, I'm granting joint custody. The child will split time between Mr. Moretti and Ms. Celeste Rodriguez, with regular reviews to assess stability and parenting quality. If Mr. Moretti continues demonstrating improvement, full custody may be reconsidered in 1 year. The gavel came down. Salvatore had won. Sort of. He'd lost his empire, his fortune, and his reputation, but he'd kept his son. For now. Amatam. That night, Salvatore sat in Luca's room watching the baby sleep. The apartment was quieter than before. Most of the luxury furnishings had been seized or sold to pay legal fees. Rosa had left. He couldn't afford her anymore. The penthouse itself would be gone soon, traded for something smaller and affordable. Everything he'd spent 15 years building was gone. And sitting in the ruins of his old life, Salvatore finally felt something other than emptiness. Relief. The apartment Salvatore moved into was a fourth-floor walk-up in Queens. No doorman, no elevator, no marble countertops or floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Just 3 small rooms with radiators that clanked at night and neighbors who yelled through thin walls. Luca's crib barely fit in the bedroom. Salvatore slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. The kitchen was the size of a closet. Everything smelled like the Chinese restaurant downstairs. It was the furthest thing from the penthouse Serafina had decorated with such careful attention. But it was theirs, and nobody could take it away because Salvatore had already lost everything worth taking. The first morning in the new place, Salvatore woke to Luca crying at 5 a.m. No Rosa to handle it, no night nurse, just him and a 7-month-old who was furious about being hungry. Salvatore stumbled into the bedroom, eyes still half closed. Luca was standing in his crib. When had he learned to stand? Shaking the bars like a prisoner demanding release. All right, I'm coming. He changed the diaper first, still clumsy with the tabs, but better than he used to be. Luca kicked the entire time, making it harder. Salvatore's hands were shaking from exhaustion. He'd been up until 3 a.m. reviewing testimony notes for the federal case against Dante and the other families. Bottle next. He'd prepared 4 of them the night before, following Rosa's instructions. Keep them refrigerated. Warm one at a time. Test the temperature on your wrist before feeding. He did everything right. Luca drank half the bottle and threw up on Salvatore's only clean shirt. Perfect, Salvatore muttered, stripping off the shirt and tossing it toward the laundry basket. It missed. Everything in this apartment was too small to aim properly. He fed Luca the rest of the bottle shirtless, the baby's tiny hand gripping his chest hair like a lifeline. After the feeding, Salvatore tried putting Luca back down for another hour of sleep. The baby had other plans. He wanted to play, wanted attention, wanted his father to do something other than stand there looking exhausted. So Salvatore sat on the floor and stacked plastic blocks while Luca knocked them over and laughed. This was his life now. And some mornings it felt like punishment. Other mornings, rare ones, it felt like redemption. Putes. Celeste showed up for her first custody visit 3 days later. She arrived at exactly 9 a.m., dressed like she was going to court. Professional. Cold. Armed with a checklist of things to inspect. Salvatore let her in without a word. She walked through the apartment slowly, taking notes on her phone. Checked the kitchen for cleanliness. Inspected Luca's crib for safety hazards. Opened the refrigerator and counted the bottles. "Where's the changing table?" she asked. "Don't have one. I use the bed." "That's not sanitary." "There's a changing pad. I wash it." Celeste wrote something on her phone. Salvatore watched from the doorway, jaw tight. Every note she took felt like an accusation. Every question felt like a test he was failing. How many times does he eat at night? Twice, sometimes 3 if he's fussy. "And you handle all the feedings yourself?" "Yeah." "No help?" "Can't afford help." Another note. Salvatore's hands curled into fists. He wanted to throw her out, wanted to tell her this was his home and she had no right to judge how he was surviving. But the custody agreement gave her exactly that right. She had visitation every Wednesday and alternating weekends. The court had been clear. Any interference with Celeste's access could result in modified custody arrangements. Translation: if Salvatore pissed her off, he'd lose Luca permanently. So he stood there and let her inspect his life like it was evidence at a crime scene. Finally, she picked up Luca. The baby had been playing on a blanket in the living room, surrounded by toys Salvatore had bought from a second-hand store. Luca looked up at Celeste and his face crumpled. He started crying immediately. "He doesn't know you," Salvatore said. "That's because you kept him from me for months." "I kept him from nobody. You filed for custody before even asking to see him. Because I knew you'd say no." Celeste bounced Luca gently, trying to calm him. The baby kept crying, reaching towards Salvatore. "You don't share. You control. That's who you are." Salvatore bit back the response building in his throat. Arguing would accomplish nothing except giving Celeste ammunition for the next court review. "He'll warm up to you," Salvatore said instead. "Just takes time." "I have 3 hours, according to the agreement. Then you should get started." Celeste left with Luca still crying in her arms. Salvatore stood in the doorway, listening to his son's wails echo down the stairwell until they faded into traffic noise. Then he went back inside and stared at the empty apartment. 3 hours felt like forever. Salvatore's cooperation with federal prosecutors made him a target. Not from law enforcement, they had what they wanted, but from everyone else. The families he'd betrayed, the associates whose names he'd given up, the entire criminal infrastructure that depended on loyalty and silence. He was a rat now, and rats got exterminated. The first threat came through his old attorney, Marcus. They met at a diner in Brooklyn, far from anywhere Salvatore used to operate. Marcus looked nervous, kept glancing at the door like he expected someone to walk in shooting. "You need to take this seriously," Marcus said, sliding a phone across the table. "They're sending messages." Salvatore picked up the phone. The screen showed a photo of his new apartment building, taken from across the street. Recent, he could see his living room window in the frame. When was this sent? 2 days ago, from a burner, untraceable. What's the message? That they know where you are, that federal protection only goes so far, that if you testify, there will be consequences. Salvatore put the phone down. "I'm testifying. Even if it puts your son at risk?" The question hit like a knife between the ribs. Salvatore had convinced himself that cooperating with the feds was the right choice, the only choice. Burn down the empire before it burned him, start over clean, but he hadn't considered that Luca would become collateral damage. "They won't touch the kid," Salvatore said, trying to convince himself as much as Marcus. "That crosses lines even these people won't cross." "You sure about that? Because Dante's not the only one you burned. There are people in that network who'll do anything to send a message." "So what do you want me to do? Refuse to testify? Go to prison instead?" "I want you to be realistic. Federal protection means a safe house and a new identity. It means disappearing, no more custody hearings, no more visits from Celeste, no more life in New York." Salvatore stared at the photo of his apartment, his crappy fourth-floor walk-up with thin walls and a radiator that clanked. The place he'd been trying to turn into something resembling a home. "I can't disappear," he said quietly. "The court gave Celeste joint custody. If I take Luca and run, I lose him anyway. If you stay, you might lose more than custody." "I'll take my chances," Marcus sighed. "You're being stubborn." "Yeah, I am. Uptight." The next custody exchange happened on Friday. Celeste was supposed to drop Luca off at 6 p.m. She showed up at 8, no apology, no explanation. Luca was asleep in his car seat. Salvatore lifted him out carefully, trying not to wake him. The baby stirred but didn't open his eyes, just made a small noise and settled against Salvatore's chest. "He was fine," Celeste said. "We went to the park. He ate well. No problems." "You were 2 hours late." "I got stuck in traffic. You could have called." "I'm calling now. Luca's back." That's what matters. Salvatore wanted to argue, wanted to point out that 2 hours late was the same disrespect he'd shown Serafina when he missed appointments and ignored calls. But he couldn't say that without admitting she'd been right about him all along. So he just nodded. "Next time, call." "Sure." Celeste turned to leave, then stopped. "By the way, I'm filing a motion to modify the custody arrangement." Salvatore's grip on Luca tightened. "Why?" "Because this apartment isn't suitable for a child long-term. No proper changing table, no separate bedroom for him. The neighborhood's not safe." "The court already approved it." "That was temporary approval pending review. The review's next month. My lawyer thinks we have a strong case for primary custody. Primary custody means what? It means Luca lives with me full time. You get supervised visits. The words landed like a physical blow. Supervised visits. The kind of arrangement reserved for parents who couldn't be trusted alone with their own children. I'm his father, and I'm his aunt, and his mother's sister, and the only family member who's been consistently present in his life. I've been present for 3 months, Salvatore. 3 months out of his entire life. That doesn't erase the first 6 months where a nurse raised him while you played gangster. Salvatore felt heat rising in his chest. Anger, frustration, the old instinct to threaten and intimidate until people backed down. But Celeste wasn't afraid of him. She'd never been afraid of him. That's what made her dangerous. You're doing this to punish me, he said. I'm doing this to protect Luca. From what? From becoming the next casualty of your choices. She left before he could respond. Salvatore carried Luca inside and laid him in the crib. The baby didn't wake up, just curled onto his side and kept sleeping, oblivious to the war being fought over his future. Salvatore sat on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. Celeste was right, about all of it. The apartment was too small. The neighborhood was rough. Salvatore was barely holding his life together while testifying against people who wanted him dead. He was asking a judge to believe he could be a good father when he could barely prove he was a functional adult. But the federal trial started 2 weeks later. Salvatore sat in a witness box in downtown Manhattan and spent 3 days answering questions about territory maps, money laundering routes, and the hierarchy of the criminal organization he'd helped build. Dante sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking calm, almost bored. Like this was a minor inconvenience rather than a racketeering trial that could send him to prison for life. Their eyes met once during testimony. Dante smiled. Not the shark smile from the restaurant. Something colder. A promise. This isn't over. Salvatore kept talking. Named names. Described operations. Handed over every piece of evidence the prosecutors needed to dismantle the network. By the third day, Dante's attorney was visibly frustrated. Mr. Moretti, isn't it true that you're only cooperating to avoid prison yourself? Yes. And that you're willing to say anything, true or false, to secure immunity? No. Everything I've said is true. How convenient. You build a criminal empire alongside my client, then turn on him the moment it benefits you. I turned on him because I wanted out, or because you wanted revenge. Because Dante Valieri was more successful than you, more respected, and you couldn't handle playing second fiddle. Salvatore looked at Dante, then back at the attorney. I couldn't handle being the kind of man my wife died believing I was. So I stopped being that man. If that means Dante goes to prison, I'm fine with it. The courtroom was silent. The attorney tried a few more angles, but the damage was done. Salvatore's testimony was credible, detailed, corroborated by physical evidence the feds had seized during the raids. By the end of the week, Dante was convicted on 18 counts. He'd spend the rest of his life in federal prison, and Salvatore had signed his own death warrant. Bang! The threats escalated immediately. More photos of the apartment, messages describing Luca's daily routine in unsettling detail, the park he went to, the bodega where Salvatore bought diapers, the pediatrician's office on Amsterdam Avenue. Someone was watching them, constantly. Marcus set up another meeting. This time, he brought a federal agent named Torres. You're not taking this seriously enough, Torres said. He was young, intense, the kind of agent who believed in his job. These people will kill you, and they'll do it in a way that sends a message to anyone else thinking about cooperating. I'm aware. Then why are you still here? We offered witness protection, a fresh start somewhere far from New York. You refused. I have a custody arrangement. I can't just disappear. You can if you're dead. Salvatore looked at Torres. What do you want me to do? Take the protection. Move to Montana or Oregon or wherever. Change your name, start over. And my son? Bring him. We'll handle the legal complications. You mean kidnap him from his aunt and disappear? That'll go over great in family court. Torres leaned forward. Mr. Moretti, you're not hearing me. There are at least 6 contracts out on you right now. 6 different crews looking to collect. And every day you stay in this apartment, you're making it easier for them. I hear you fine, but I'm not running. Why not? Because running is what I've been doing my whole life. Running from responsibility, running from consequences, running from anything that required me to actually show up. Salvatore stood. I spent years building an empire I thought mattered. Turned out it was all bullshit. The only thing that actually matters is in a crib in my apartment, and I'm not abandoning him because some criminals are mad I told the truth. Torres exchanged a look with Marcus. You're being stupid. Probably. Definitely. Torres pulled out a card and slid it across the table. When you change your mind, and you will, call this number. We'll extract you within 24 hours. Salvatore took the card but didn't look at it. Anything else? Yeah. Don't get killed before the sentencing hearing. We need you to testify against the others. I'll try my best. Salvatore started noticing the surveillance after that meeting. A car parked across the street that hadn't been there before. The same man in a Yankees cap standing at the corner bodega 3 days in a row. Someone sitting on the stoop of the building next door, watching. They weren't even hiding it anymore. The message was clear. We know where you are. We're waiting. Salvatore changed his routine. Started using different routes to the pediatrician, bought groceries at random stores instead of the same bodega. Never took Luca to the same park twice. But paranoia was exhausting, and Luca was too young to understand why his father kept looking over his shoulder or why they never stayed anywhere for long. One afternoon at a playground in Astoria, Salvatore was pushing Luca on the baby swings when a man approached. Older guy, gray hair, looked like someone's grandfather. Cute kid, the man said. Salvatore's hand moved instinctively toward his waistband. He'd been carrying a gun since the threat started. Illegal for someone with his record, but survival beat legality. The man noticed, smiled. Relax, I'm not here to hurt you. Then why are you here? To deliver a message from someone you used to work with. The man sat on the bench beside the swings. They want you to know that testifying was a mistake, a big one, and mistakes have consequences. Tell them I'm aware. They also want you to know that consequences don't always happen immediately. Sometimes they wait. Sometimes they happen when you're not expecting it, when you're comfortable, when you think you're safe. Luca laughed in the swing, oblivious to the threat being delivered 10 feet away. Salvatore stopped pushing. Is there an offer attached to this message, or just intimidation? There's an offer. Stop cooperating. Recant your testimony. Claim you were coerced by federal agents. And if I do that, the contracts get canceled. You live. Your son grows up with a father. What happens to Dante? That's not your concern anymore. Salvatore looked at Luca. The baby was reaching for him now, tired of the swing. Salvatore lifted him out and held him close. Luca grabbed his collar and made happy, babbling sounds. Tell them no, Salvatore said. The man raised an eyebrow. You're refusing. I'm refusing. Even though it means they'll come for you? Especially because of that. Salvatore met the man's eyes. I spent 15 years doing whatever it took to survive. Lying, cheating, hurting people. And it cost me everything that mattered. I'm not doing it anymore. Not for Dante, not for the families, not for anyone. The man stood slowly. That's disappointing. Yeah, well, life's full of disappointments. It's about to be full of something worse. The man walked away without looking back. Salvatore stayed at the playground for another hour, holding Luca and watching every person who entered or left. His phone buzzed. Marcus. We need to talk. Now. They met at a different diner. Marcus looked worse than before. Hadn't slept. Probably hadn't eaten either. You turned down the offer, Marcus said. How'd you know about it? Because the feds know about it. They're monitoring communications from the families. They heard about the approach. And? And they're pulling out, Salvatore. They can't protect someone who refuses to be protected. The U.S. Attorney's Office is officially recommending you accept witness protection and relocate immediately. I already told Torres no. I know. That's why I'm here, to tell you this isn't a negotiation anymore. You either accept protection or you're on your own. Salvatore leaned back in the booth. So I take Luca and disappear. Change our names. Move to some small town in the middle of nowhere. Never see New York again. Never see Celeste again. Never have any connection to our old life. Yes. And what happens when Luca's old enough to ask questions? when he wants to know where he came from, who his mother was. You tell him the truth, that you did what you had to do to keep him safe. Or I tell him I ran away. Again, just like I ran away from every other hard thing in my life. Marcus rubbed his eyes. You're being stubborn. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. You're choosing pride over survival. I'm choosing to face consequences instead of running from them. Salvatore stood. Tell Torres thanks for the offer, but I'm staying. Salvatore. I'm staying. Ichaki. The custody review hearing happened the following Tuesday. Salvatore walked into the courthouse knowing Celeste had the advantage. Her apartment was bigger, her neighborhood was safer, her life was stable. His life was a disaster held together with duct tape and federal immunity. Celeste's lawyer went first. She presented updated evidence, photos of her spacious two-bedroom in a good school district, character references from neighbors and friends, documentation of a stable job with benefits and regular hours. Then she presented evidence about Salvatore, surveillance photos showing him carrying a gun, federal testimony transcripts revealing the extent of his criminal involvement, witness statements from neighbors describing suspicious men watching his building. Your Honor, the lawyer said, Mr. Moretti is currently living under active threat from organized crime figures. He's carrying an illegal firearm. His apartment is under constant surveillance. This is not a safe environment for a child. The judge looked at Salvatore. Is this accurate? Salvatore stood. Yes, Your Honor. You're carrying a weapon? For protection, there are credible threats against my life. And you think that makes you a suitable guardian for a 7-month-old baby? I think it makes me a realistic one. I testified against dangerous people. They're angry about it, but I'm taking precautions. Precautions like what? I vary my routine. I'm aware of my surroundings. I keep my son away from potential threats. Mr. Moretti, that's not a life. That's survival. Sometimes they're the same thing. The judge reviewed her notes. The courtroom was silent. Salvatore could feel Celeste watching him from across the aisle, her expression unreadable. Finally, the judge spoke. I'm modifying the custody arrangement. Primary physical custody will transfer to Miss Rodriguez, effective immediately. Mr. Moretti will have supervised visitation every other weekend, with reviews every 3 months. The gavel came down. Salvatore felt something crack inside his chest. Supervised visitation. He'd been reduced to a supervised visitation parent, the kind of father who needed a court-appointed observer to make sure he didn't screw up his own kid. Celeste's lawyer was already gathering papers. Salvatore's attorney was whispering something about appeals, but Salvatore wasn't listening. He was watching Celeste, who was crying quietly in her seat. Not tears of victory. Something else. Relief, maybe. Or grief. Or both. After the hearing, they stood in the hallway outside the courtroom. Luca was with a social worker, waiting to be transferred to Celeste's custody. I didn't want it to be like this, Celeste said. Salvatore didn't respond. I'm not trying to take him away from you. I'm trying to keep him safe. By giving me supervised visits? Like I'm dangerous? You are dangerous, Salvatore. You're being hunted by criminals. You're carrying a gun. You're living in an apartment under surveillance. That's not safe for Luca. And you think I don't know that? You think I'm not terrified every single day that something will happen to him because of me? Then do something about it. Accept the witness protection, disappear, start over somewhere safe. I can't. The custody agreement. Forget the custody agreement. Celeste grabbed his arm. I'll sign whatever you need. I'll tell the court I support relocation. Just get out of here before they kill you. Salvatore looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time since Serafina's death, he saw past the anger and grief to the person underneath. Someone who was just as scared as he was. Someone trying to protect the last piece of her sister that still existed. Why would you do that? He asked. Because Luca needs his father alive more than he needs him in New York. Celeste's voice cracked. Serafina was right about a lot of things, but she was wrong about you being irredeemable. I've watched you try. I've seen you show up. You're not the man she wrote about in that letter anymore. So why take custody? Because trying isn't the same as succeeding. And right now, you're failing. Not because you're a bad father, but because you're in an impossible situation. The social worker approached with Luca. The baby saw Salvatore and reached for him immediately. Salvatore took him and held him tight, breathing in that specific baby smell of formula and soap and innocence. "I'm sorry," Celeste whispered. "I really am." Salvatore kissed Luca's head and handed him to Celeste. The baby started crying immediately, arms reaching back toward Salvatore. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Walking away felt like dying. That night, Salvatore sat alone in the apartment staring at Luca's empty crib. The place felt hollow without the baby's breathing, without the constant presence that had defined his life for months. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then realized that everyone who wanted to kill him already knew where he lived. What difference did one phone call make? "Yeah. Mr. Moretti, it's Torres. I'm not interested in witness protection. I'm not calling about that. I'm calling because we intercepted communications suggesting an imminent attempt on your life." Salvatore laughed. It sounded unhinged even to himself. "There's always an imminent attempt. This one's different. They're planning to move tomorrow night. They know about the custody ruling. They know you're alone. They're going to hit the apartment. So arrest them. We don't know who they are yet, just that it's happening." "Great. Thanks for the warning." "Salvatore, I'm serious. You need to leave that apartment tonight. Get somewhere safe. Let us protect you." "I appreciate the concern, but I'm done running." "This isn't running. This is surviving." "Same thing." Salvatore hung up. He sat in the dark for a long time. The radiator clanked. Someone yelled in Spanish through the wall. Traffic hummed outside the window. Tomorrow night, people would come to kill him. And he had no plan except to be there when they arrived. Not because he was brave, not because he was stupid, but because he was finally ready to face the consequences of every choice he'd made for the past 15 years. And if those consequences meant dying alone in a fourth-floor walk-up, well, he'd earned worse. The next day passed slowly. Salvatore cleaned the apartment, washed dishes, organized Luca's clothes and toys, even though the baby wouldn't be coming back. He found himself preparing bottles out of habit before remembering there was nobody to feed. Marcus called twice. Torres called 3 times. Celeste sent a text asking if he was okay. He ignored all of them. At 8 p.m., he made coffee and sat in the living room with the lights off. The gun was on the table beside him. Loaded, safety off. He wasn't planning to use it, but if they forced his hand, at least he'd go down fighting. The hours crawled past. 9 p.m., 10, 11. At midnight, Salvatore started thinking maybe Torres had been wrong. Maybe the threat was exaggerated. Maybe... The door exploded inward. 3 men rushed inside. Ski masks, gloves. One carried a baseball bat. Another had a knife. The third had a gun. Salvatore grabbed his own gun, but wasn't fast enough. The first man swung the bat and connected with Salvatore's wrist. The gun went flying. Pain shot up his arm, white-hot and blinding. The second man grabbed him and slammed him against the wall, the knife pressed against his throat, close enough to draw blood. "You should have taken the offer," the man said. Salvatore tasted copper. Probably. "Any last words?" Salvatore thought about Serafina's letter, about Luca crying when Celeste took him away, about every moment he'd chosen wrong and couldn't take back. "Tell Dante he won," Salvatore said. The man smiled behind the ski mask. "We will." He raised the knife. And the apartment door burst open again. Federal agents flooded inside, tactical gear, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The man with the knife hesitated. Just for a second. It was enough. The agents tackled all 3 men. Guns clattered to the floor. Someone was screaming. Salvatore slid down the wall, his injured wrist cradled against his chest, watching the chaos unfold like it was happening to someone else. Torres appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" Salvatore laughed. It came out broken. "You were watching the apartment." "Of course we were. You think we'd just let you die?" "I told you no protection. And we told you we'd keep you alive anyway." Torres helped him up. "Whether you like it or not." Paramedics arrived. They checked Salvatore's wrist, fractured but not broken, and bandaged the cut on his neck. The 3 attackers were hauled away in handcuffs. The apartment was suddenly full of federal agents documenting evidence and taking statements. Torres sat beside Salvatore on the couch. "This was your point of no return." "What?" "Tonight. This was the moment you couldn't ignore anymore. You can keep pretending you're fine, or you can admit you need help. Salvatore stared at his empty apartment, at the overturned furniture and blood on the walls, at the life he'd been clinging to that had just been torn apart. "I need help," he said quietly. "Say it again. I need help." Torres nodded. "Good, because we're getting you out of here tonight. Witness protection, new identity, new life. And this time you don't get to say no." Salvatore thought about Luca sleeping in Celeste's apartment across the city, thought about supervised visits and custody reviews, and all the legal mechanisms designed to keep him at arm's length from his own son. Then he thought about the knife at his throat and the certainty that next time there wouldn't be federal agents waiting to intervene. "What about Celeste?" he asked. "We'll handle it. She already told the court she'd support relocation if it kept you alive." "And Luca?" "Comes with you. That was always the plan." Salvatore closed his eyes. This was it. The point where he stopped trying to control everything and just surrendered to whatever came next. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." Torres squeezed his shoulder. "Pack light. We leave in an hour." Salvatore stood and walked into Luca's empty room. The crib was still there. The toys, the changing pad, all the pieces of a life he'd been trying desperately to build from the ruins of the old one. He packed a single bag. 1 hour later, he was gone. The safe house was in rural Pennsylvania, 3 hours from New York, middle of nowhere. A farmhouse surrounded by empty fields and a single dirt road that led to a highway nobody used anymore. The kind of place where you could scream and nobody would hear you. Salvatore arrived at 4 in the morning with Torres and 2 other agents. No Luca. The baby was still with Celeste, waiting for the paperwork to clear before the transfer could happen legally. Torres had promised it would take 48 hours maximum. That was 3 days ago. Salvatore sat at the kitchen table of the safe house staring at his phone. No service. The agents had confiscated his old phone and given him a burner with exactly 3 contacts. Torres, the local FBI field office, and an emergency line that went directly to witness protection coordinators. He'd called Torres 16 times. Every call went to voicemail. "Where's my son?" Salvatore asked Agent Chen, one of the 2 agents assigned to guard him. Chen was younger than Torres, less experienced, the kind of agent who followed orders without asking questions. "Still processing the custody transfer," Chen said. He was making coffee at the counter, back turned. "These things take time." "You said 48 hours. "That was the estimate. Sometimes it takes longer." "How much longer?" "I don't know, Mr. Moretti. I'm not handling that part." Salvatore stood up. His fractured wrist throbbed inside the cast they'd put on at the hospital. "I want to talk to Torres." "He's not available." "Then make him available." Chen turned around. His hand rested casually on his belt, near his weapon. Not threatening, just present. "Mr. Moretti, you need to calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down. You people promised me my son would be here by now." "And he will be. As soon as the paperwork clears." "What paperwork?" "Celeste already agreed to the transfer. The court gave her primary custody specifically so she could make this decision." "What's the delay?" Chen poured his coffee slowly. "There are complications." "What kind of complications?" "The kind I'm not authorized to discuss." Salvatore felt heat rising in his chest, the same anger that used to get people hurt back when he had power, back when a phone call could make problems disappear. But he didn't have power anymore. He had a broken wrist and a burner phone in the middle of Pennsylvania while his son was 3 hours away with people who wouldn't answer his calls. "I want to see Celeste," Salvatore said. "That's not possible." "Why not?" "Because you're in witness protection. Contact with anyone from your old life compromises security." "She's not my old life. She's my son's guardian. Right now she is. But once the transfer completes, you'll have full custody and she'll have no legal standing. Then complete the transfer." "We're working on it." Salvatore grabbed the burner phone and threw it against the wall. It shattered into pieces. Chen's hand moved to his weapon. The other agent, Martinez, appeared in the doorway from the living room. "Problem?" Martinez asked. "No problem," Chen said, eyes locked on Salvatore. "Mr. Moretti's just frustrated." "I'm not frustrated. I'm being lied to." "Nobody's lying to you." "Then where the hell is my son?" Neither agent answered. They just looked at each other with an expression Salvatore recognized from his years running operations. The look people exchanged when they knew something the person asking questions didn't, when they were deciding how much truth to reveal. "What aren't you telling me?" Salvatore asked quietly. Chen set down his coffee. "You should sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want answers." "Sit down." Salvatore sat, not because Chen ordered it, but because his legs suddenly felt unstable, like his body knew what was coming before his brain did. Martinez closed the kitchen door. Chen pulled out a chair and sat across from Salvatore. "There's been a development," Chen said, "regarding your son." "What kind of development?" "Celeste Rodriguez filed an emergency motion with the family court 2 days ago. She's claiming the witness protection transfer would be harmful to the child's well-being. She's requesting the court block the relocation." The words hit like a physical blow. Salvatore couldn't breathe for a moment. "She agreed to support the transfer." "She changed her mind." "Why?" "You'd have to ask her, but the motion claims that removing Luca from his established support system, her home, his pediatrician, his routine, would be traumatic. She's arguing that witness protection serves your interests, not his." "My interests? I'm trying to stay alive so I can be his father." "That's your perspective. Her perspective is that you're running from consequences again, choosing survival over stability." Salvatore stood up so fast the chair fell backward. "That's bullshit. She told me herself to take the protection. She said Luca needed me alive. And now she's saying he needs stability more." Chen's voice was maddeningly calm. "The court hearing is scheduled for next week. Until then, Luca remains with her." "Next week? You said 48 hours. That was before the emergency motion." Salvatore wanted to hit something, wanted to grab Chen by his tactical vest and slam him against the wall until he admitted this was all some kind of mistake. But violence wouldn't change anything. He'd learned that lesson too many times already. "I want to talk to her," Salvatore said, "face to face." "That's not happening." "Then get Torres on the phone." "Torres is in New York handling the logistics." "Get him on the phone anyway." Chen exchanged another look with Martinez. Then he pulled out his own phone and made a call. Put it on speaker. Torres answered on the third ring. "What?" "It's Chen. I'm here with Moretti. He wants to talk about the custody situation." "Of course he does." Torres sighed. Background noise suggested he was in a car. Traffic, horns, New York. "Put him on." Chen slid the phone across the table. "What the hell is going on?" Salvatore said. "Celeste changed her mind. It happens. You promised me she'd support the transfer." "She did support it. Then she talked to her lawyer and reconsidered. People are allowed to change their minds, Salvatore." "Not about my son, they're not." "Actually, that's exactly what primary custody means. She gets to make decisions about Luca's welfare. And she's decided that relocating him to witness protection isn't in his best interest. So what am I supposed to do? Just sit here while she keeps him? You're supposed to wait for the court hearing and make your case to the judge. A judge already ruled against me once. Then you better hope you're more convincing this time." Torres paused. "Look, Salvatore, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but Celeste has a point. Witness protection means Luca grows up with no connection to his mother's family, no history, no roots, just you and whatever story you decide to tell him. That's better than growing up with no father at all. Is it? Because from where she's standing, you've already proven you're willing to disappear when things get hard. First with Serafina, now with this. Maybe she thinks Luca deserves better than a father who's always running." The accusation cut deeper than any knife the attackers had held to his throat, because it was true. Every word was true. "I'm not running anymore," Salvatore said. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. "I'm trying to survive so I can be there for him." "Then prove it at the hearing." Torres hung up. Salvatore stared at the dead phone. Chen took it back without a word. Martinez opened the kitchen door and left. The farmhouse was silent except for wind rattling the windows and the hum of the refrigerator. Salvatore was alone again, just like he'd been in the hospital the night Serafina died, just like he'd been in the apartment after Celeste took Luca. Always alone, always too late. Always paying for choices he'd made when he thought power mattered more than people. The next 4 days were a special kind of torture. Salvatore had nothing to do except wait. The safe house had no television, no internet, just old books and a radio that only picked up static. Chen and Martinez rotated shifts, watching him like he was a prisoner instead of a protected witness. He tried calling Celeste using Chen's phone. She wouldn't answer. He tried writing her a letter. Martinez said it would compromise security to send it. He tried asking Torres for updates. Every call went to voicemail. On the fifth day, a new agent arrived. Her name was Kim. She was older than the others. Gray hair, sharp eyes, the kind of person who'd seen everything and couldn't be lied to. She sat across from Salvatore at the kitchen table and opened a folder. "We need to talk about your testimony," she said. "I already testified against Dante Valieri." "Yes, but there are 6 other defendants awaiting trial. We need you for those cases too." "Fine. Whatever you need. It's not that simple." Kim pulled out photographs. Crime scene photos. Bodies. Blood. 3 of the defendants are accused of murder. Brutal murders. The kind that send a message. Salvatore looked at the photos. He recognized the victims. Low-level associates who'd tried to leave the organization. People who'd made the same choice Salvatore had made. Cooperation over loyalty. They'd all ended up dead. "What's your point?" Salvatore asked. "My point is that testifying against these defendants makes you an even bigger target. The contracts on your life will multiply. And the people coming after you won't be amateurs with baseball bats. They'll be professionals. I'm already in witness protection. Witness protection has limitations. Ask the 16 protected witnesses who've been killed in the past decade." Kim closed the folder. "I need to know you're committed, because if you testify in these trials, there's no going back. You'll be in protection for the rest of your life, and so will your son. If I get him back, that's the other thing we need to discuss." Kim pulled out another document. Celeste's lawyer filed a supplementary motion yesterday. They're not just blocking the witness protection transfer anymore. They're requesting permanent sole custody. Salvatore's hands clenched into fists. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you're unable to provide a stable home environment, that your life is defined by danger, that Luca deserves to grow up without the constant threat of violence." "That's not fair. The only reason my life is dangerous is because I did the right thing." "The right thing for the justice system, not necessarily the right thing for your son." Kim leaned forward. "Here's the reality, Salvatore. If you continue testifying, you strengthen Celeste's case. Every trial makes you more of a target. Every conviction makes her argument more convincing. The judge will look at your situation and decide Luca is better off with his aunt. So what are you saying? I should stop cooperating?" "I'm saying you have a choice to make. Your testimony could put away some of the most dangerous criminals on the East Coast, but it will also cost you custody of your son, permanently." Salvatore stared at her. "That's not a choice. That's extortion. That's reality. And you need to decide which matters more, justice or family. They should both matter." "Sure, in a perfect world. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world where choices have consequences and you can't have everything." Kim stood up and left the folder on the table. Inside were the crime scene photos. The murder victims who'd died because they'd tried to leave the life. People just like Salvatore. "You have 24 hours to decide," Kim said. "After that, we need your answer." She left him alone with the photos and the impossible decision. Salvatore didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table staring at the photos until his eyes burned. Every victim had a story. Families, kids, people who'd wanted out and paid for it with their lives. If Salvatore stopped testifying, those murders would go unpunished. The killers would walk free. The organization would survive. And everything Salvatore had sacrificed, his empire, his safety, his dignity, would mean nothing. But if he kept testifying, he'd lose Luca. The court would side with Celeste. They'd rule that stability mattered more than biology, that Luca deserved a life without federal agents and safe houses and the constant shadow of violence. And Salvatore would become exactly what Serafina had predicted in her letter, an absent father. Not because he chose business over family this time, but because he chose justice over his son. Either way, he lost. At dawn, Chen brought him breakfast, eggs and toast, coffee. Salvatore didn't touch it. "You look like hell," Chen observed. "Feel worse." Kim told me about the choice. "It's not a choice. It's a trap." "Maybe, but it's the trap you're in." Chen sat down. "For what it's worth, I think you should keep testifying." Salvatore looked at him. "Why?" Because those guys in the photos, they have families too. Kids who grew up without fathers because someone decided murder was an acceptable business strategy. Your testimony puts their killers away. That matters. Not as much as my son, doesn't it? Chen pushed the coffee toward him. You told Torres you weren't running anymore, that you were tired of choosing wrong. This is your chance to choose right, even if it costs you everything. Everything includes Luca. Yeah, it does. Chen stood up. But at least he'll grow up knowing his father did something that mattered, something good. That's more than a lot of kids get. He left Salvatore alone with the cold eggs and the impossible math of sacrifice. The custody hearing happened via video conference. Salvatore sat in the safe house living room with a laptop while Kim and Torres flanked him off camera. On the screen was the family court judge from New York, Celeste, and her lawyer, and a court-appointed guardian who'd been assigned to represent Luca's interests. Salvatore looked terrible. He knew it. Hadn't slept, hadn't shaved. His cast was dirty, and his eyes were bloodshot. He looked exactly like what Celeste's lawyer was about to argue he was. Unstable. The hearing started with Celeste's lawyer presenting the case for permanent sole custody. She was efficient, ruthless, showed photos of Celeste's apartment, documented Luca's routine, presented testimony from pediatricians and child psychologists about the importance of stability. Then she showed photos of the safe house. Salvatore's stomach dropped. How the hell did she have photos of the safe house? Your Honor, the lawyer said, this is where Mr. Moretti is currently living. A federal witness protection facility in rural Pennsylvania. No permanent address, no community, no support system. He's surrounded by armed guards because his life is under constant threat. This is not an environment for raising a child. The judge studied the photos. Mr. Moretti, is this accurate? Salvatore leaned toward the camera. It's temporary, until the trials are finished. And how long will that take? I don't know. Months, maybe longer. And during that time, where would your son live? With me, in protection. In a safe house, surrounded by federal agents, with no stability or normalcy. It's better than growing up without a father. Is it? The judge looked at her notes. Mr. Moretti, I've reviewed your history. You missed your wife's death because you were signing business contracts. You had minimal involvement in your son's first 6 months of life. You've been living under federal protection for less than a week, and you're already asking the court to uproot a 7-month-old from the only stable home he's known. I'm trying to keep him safe. Safe from what? The threats exist because of choices you made. Choices to participate in organized crime. Choices to testify against dangerous people. Your son didn't make those choices. Why should he pay for them? Salvatore didn't have an answer. Celeste spoke for the first time. Her voice was shaking. Your Honor, I loved my sister. And I want to believe Salvatore can be the father Luca deserves, but I can't risk my nephew's life on that hope. He needs stability. He needs normalcy. He needs to grow up in a real home, not a federal safe house. Ms. Rodriguez, are you requesting permanent sole custody? Yes, Your Honor. With no visitation for Mr. Moretti. Celeste hesitated, looked directly at the camera, at Salvatore. Supervised visitation, once the federal protection period ends, when it's safe. That could be years, Salvatore said. I know. Tears were running down Celeste's face now. And I'm sorry, but Luca's safety comes first. The judge reviewed her notes for a long time. The silence was suffocating. Salvatore felt Torres's hand on his shoulder. A warning. Stay calm. Don't react. Finally, the judge spoke. This court grants sole legal and physical custody to Celeste Rodriguez, effective immediately. Visitation rights for Salvatore Moretti are suspended pending completion of his federal protection obligations and review by this court. Mr. Moretti, you have 30 days to appeal this decision. The gavel came down. The screen went black. Salvatore sat staring at his reflection in the dark laptop screen. Torres was saying something. Kim was gathering papers. Chen was standing in the doorway. But Salvatore couldn't hear any of it. He'd just lost his son. Not temporarily, not conditionally, permanently. Salvatore spent the next 3 days in his room. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. Just stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment that had led him here. Every choice, every mistake. Every time he'd chosen wrong and told himself it would work out eventually. It never worked out. It just kept getting worse. On the fourth day, Torres came to the room, knocked once, and walked in without waiting for permission. "We need to talk about the next trial," Torres said. "No." "Salvatore, shit. I'm done testifying." Torres closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed. "You don't mean that." "I mean exactly that. I testified against Dante. I gave you everything you needed to put him away. That was the deal. I'm not doing it anymore." The deal was full cooperation in exchange for immunity and protection. The protection cost me my son, so I'm renegotiating. That's not how this works. Salvatore sat up. His cast was filthy. His hair was matted. He looked like something that had crawled out of a grave. "Then how does it work, Torres? You tell me. Because from where I'm sitting, I did everything right and lost everything that mattered." "You did what you had to do to survive." "No, I did what you told me to do, and it destroyed my life." Salvatore stood. His legs were shaky. "I'm done. Find another witness." "There is no other witness. You're the only one with comprehensive knowledge of the organization." "Then the cases fail. That's not my problem anymore." Torres's expression hardened. "If you refuse to testify, we revoke your immunity. You go to prison for your role in the organization. Is that what you want?" "I don't care what happens to me anymore." "What about Luca? You think he's better off with a father in prison than a father in protection?" "He doesn't have a father at all anymore. The court made that clear. The court said visitation is suspended, not terminated. You could still get him back, eventually, if you stay clean and stay alive and prove you're stable." "By hiding in safe houses for the rest of my life? Great plan." Torres stood. "You're being emotional. You need to think clearly." "I am thinking clearly. For the first time in months. And what I'm seeing clearly is that cooperating with you people cost me everything. My home, my money, my son, all gone. And for what? So you can build cases against people I used to work with. So we can put murderers in prison. Find someone else to do it." "There is nobody else." Torres's voice rose. "You're it, Salvatore. You're the key to taking down the entire network. And if you walk away now, all those people, the ones in those crime scene photos Kim showed you, they died for nothing. Their killers walk free. The organization survives. Everything you sacrificed means nothing." "It already means nothing." Torres grabbed him by the shirt, shoved him against the wall. Chen appeared in the doorway, but Torres waved him off. "Listen to me," Torres said. His face was inches from Salvatore's. "You don't get to quit just because things got hard. You made a deal. You signed papers. You gave testimony. You're in this whether you like it or not. Then arrest me." "What?" "Arrest me. Revoke the immunity. Send me to prison. At least there I'll know exactly what I'm paying for." Torres stared at him, then let go. Stepped back. Ran his hands through his hair. "You really want to throw it all away?" Torres asked quietly. "There's nothing left to throw away." Torres was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's Torres. We have a problem. Moretti's refusing to cooperate further." Pause. "Yeah, complete refusal." Pause. "I don't know. He says he's done." Pause. "Okay. I'll tell him." Torres hung up and looked at Salvatore. "That was the U.S. attorney. She wants to meet with you. Tomorrow. New York." "I'm not going to New York." "Yes, you are. Because she's going to make you an offer. One time only. And if you refuse it, we revoke your immunity and prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. Prison. Asset forfeiture. Everything." "What kind of offer?" "The kind that might give you a chance to see your son again." Torres moved toward the door. "Pack your stuff. We leave at dawn." He left before Salvatore could respond. Salvatore sat on the bed trying to process what had just happened. An offer. From the U.S. attorney herself. The kind of offer that might change everything, or destroy what little remained. Either way, he'd find out tomorrow. And for the first time in days, Salvatore felt something other than despair. He felt fear. Because whatever the offer was, it would come with a price. And Salvatore had already paid more than anyone should have to pay. The question was whether he had anything left to give. The U.S. Attorney's office was on the 23rd floor of a federal building in Lower Manhattan. Torres drove Salvatore there at dawn, both of them silent for the entire 3-hour trip. Chen and Martinez followed in a second vehicle. Security protocol. Like Salvatore was important enough to need a convoy, he wasn't important. He was just useful. There was a difference. They parked in an underground garage and took a freight elevator up. No public areas, no witnesses, just gray concrete and fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. Salvatore's wrist ached inside the cast. He hadn't slept. His mouth tasted like copper and exhaustion. The elevator opened into a hallway that smelled like coffee and desperation. Torres led him to a conference room at the end. Inside was a woman in her 50s wearing a suit that probably cost more than Salvatore's entire witness protection stipend. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her expression was tighter. "Mr. Moretti," she said, "I'm Catherine Brennan, United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York." Salvatore didn't shake her hand, just sat down. Brennan didn't seem offended. She opened a folder and spread documents across the table. Case files, photographs, evidence logs, the same material Kim had shown him at the safe house. "Agent Torres tells me you're refusing to testify in the remaining trials," Brennan said. "That's right. May I ask why?" "Because it cost me my son." "Your son is in a safe, stable home with a family member who loves him. That's hardly a loss." Salvatore's hands clenched under the table. "I can't see him. The court suspended my visitation rights. Indefinitely. Temporarily. Until your protection period ends. Which could be years, or never, depending on how many trials you want me for." Brennan leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Moretti, I'm going to be direct with you. Your cooperation has been invaluable. Dante Valieri is going to prison for life because of your testimony. That's a significant victory for law enforcement, but it's not enough." "Not my problem." "Actually, it is, because your immunity agreement specifically requires full cooperation in all related prosecutions. Refusing to testify constitutes a breach of contract, which means we can prosecute you for your role in the organization. Torres already threatened me with that. It's not a threat. It's a legal reality." Brennan pulled out another document. "This is the initial indictment we prepared against you before you agreed to cooperate. Racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. If convicted on all counts, you're looking at 40 years minimum, probably life." Salvatore studied the indictment. His name was at the top in bold letters. Below it was a list of crimes that read like his entire adult life compressed into legal language. Everything he'd done, everything he'd been, everything he'd tried to walk away from. "So arrest me," Salvatore said. Brennan raised an eyebrow. "You're calling our bluff?" "I'm saying I don't care anymore. You want to send me to prison? Fine. At least I'll know where I stand, better than living in safe houses wondering if the next knock on the door is federal agents or killers." "And your son? How does he benefit from having a father in prison?" "He doesn't have a father either way. You people made sure of that." Brennan was quiet for a moment. Then she closed the folder and folded her hands on the table. "What if I told you there was another option?" Salvatore looked at her. "What kind of option?" "The kind that gets you out of witness protection. Permanently, and gives you a chance to rebuild a relationship with your son. In exchange for what?" "One more testimony, the biggest one. The case we've been building for 3 years. Brennan pulled out a new file. This one was thicker, heavier. "Do you know who Victor Kravitz is?" Salvatore's blood went cold. "Yeah, I know him." "Then you know he's the head of the entire East Coast operation. Dante worked for him. The families all answer to him. He's the top of the pyramid. And you want me to testify against him. We want you to help us build the case. Kravitz is careful. He doesn't get his hands dirty. Everything goes through intermediaries. Dante was one of them. But Dante's in prison now, and we need someone who can connect the dots between Kravitz and the actual crimes. I can't do that. I never dealt with Kravitz directly. But you dealt with people who did. You know the structure. You know how the money flows. You know where the bodies are buried, sometimes literally." Brennan leaned forward. "Mr. Moretti, Victor Kravitz has been operating for 30 years. He's responsible for hundreds of deaths, thousands of crimes, millions in stolen money, and he's never spent a single day in prison because nobody's ever been able to touch him. That's not my responsibility. It is if you want your son back." The words hung in the air like a knife. Salvatore felt his chest tighten. "Explain." "Here's the deal. You help us build the case against Kravitz, full cooperation, interviews, document review, whatever we need. In exchange, we end your witness protection period the moment Kravitz is indicted. You're free to return to New York, resume your life, apply for custody modification. And if I refuse, we prosecute you on the original charges. You go to prison. Luca grows up without a father. Your choice. Salvatore stared at the file on the table. Victor Kravitz. The name alone carried weight. The man was a ghost, a legend. The kind of criminal who'd built an empire so sophisticated that law enforcement had been chasing shadows for decades. Testifying against Dante had been dangerous. Testifying against Kravitz would be suicide. How long would it take, Salvatore asked, to build the case? 6 months, maybe 8. We need time to corroborate your information, gather supporting evidence, build an airtight case. And during those 6 months, I'm still in protection? Yes. Still can't see my son? Correct. So I spend another 6 months in hiding, help you build a case against the most dangerous man on the East Coast. And my reward is the chance to maybe get custody back. Assuming the court agrees, assuming Celeste doesn't fight it, assuming I survive long enough to try. That's the offer. Salvatore laughed. It sounded broken. You people are unbelievable. We're realistic. This is what we can give you. Take it or leave it. And if I take it and Kravitz walks, if your case falls apart, then you still get out of protection. We honor our side regardless of the verdict. But the target on my back stays. Yes. Once Kravitz knows you cooperated, you're marked for life. Protection or no protection. Salvatore stood up and walked to the window. 23 floors below, people were going about their normal lives. Walking to work, buying coffee, living in a world where the biggest danger was traffic or bad weather. He'd never have that life again, no matter what he chose. I need time to think, Salvatore said. You have 5 minutes. Brennan checked her watch. After that, we proceed with prosecution. Salvatore turned around. 5 minutes? Are you serious? Completely. This offer expires the moment you walk out that door. Accept it now or face the consequences. Torres was standing in the corner. He hadn't said a word the entire meeting. Now he caught Salvatore's eye and gave a small nod. The message was clear. Take the deal. It's the best you're going to get. Salvatore looked back at Brennan, at the files on the table, at the indictment with his name on it. If I do this, Salvatore said slowly, I want something else. You're not in a position to negotiate. I want a letter from your office stating that I cooperated fully and that my actions demonstrate rehabilitation and commitment to my son's welfare, something I can show the family court when I apply for custody modification. Brennan considered this. Done. And I want regular updates about Luca, health reports, photos, something so I know he's okay. We can arrange supervised communication with Celeste, monthly updates. I want to talk to him. He's a baby, Mr. Moretti. He can't talk. I don't care. I want video calls, weekly. Even if he just sits there, I need to see him. Brennan looked at Torres. He shrugged. Weekly video calls, Brennan agreed. Supervised through a secure connection. Anything else? Salvatore wanted to ask for more, wanted guarantees, wanted promises that this wouldn't be another trap. But he knew better. The system didn't make promises, it made deals. And this was the only deal he was going to get. No, Salvatore said. That's it. Then do we have an agreement? Salvatore thought about Luca, about the custody hearing and Celeste crying on the video screen, about the empty crib in the safe house and the hollow feeling that had been growing in his chest since the moment the judge's gavel came down. He thought about Serafina's letter, about all the chances he'd been given and all the times he'd chosen wrong. This was another chance. Maybe the last one. Yeah, Salvatore said. We have an agreement. Brennan pulled out a contract. Torres produced a pen. Salvatore signed without reading it. What was the point? The terms were simple. Betray Kravitz or lose everything. He'd already lost everything. This was just the paperwork. The debriefing started immediately. Salvatore spent the next 2 weeks in a secure facility in Manhattan, answering questions about every interaction he'd ever had with Kravitz's organization. Names, dates, locations, money amounts, routes, connections. The prosecutors were relentless. They asked the same questions 5 different ways. cross-referenced every answer against documents and surveillance records, pushed him when his memory faltered, praised him when he provided useful information. It felt like being interrogated by police, except they were on the same side. Supposedly. On the 14th day, they showed him surveillance footage from 3 years ago. A restaurant in Brooklyn. Salvatore was sitting at a table with Dante and 2 other men he didn't recognize. "Who are they?" the prosecutor asked. Salvatore squinted at the screen. The footage was grainy but clear enough. "The one on the left is Marco Santino, Dante's second-in-command. The other one I don't know. That's Victor Kravitz." Salvatore's stomach dropped. "What?" "Victor Kravitz. You were in the same room with him for over an hour, according to the timestamp. You're telling me you don't remember?" Salvatore stared at the screen. The man looked ordinary, middle-aged, gray suit, nothing remarkable. Dante introduced him as a business associate. Never said his name. I thought he was just another intermediary. "What did you discuss?" "Territory expansion, Philadelphia roots. I was pitching a plan to consolidate the distribution network." "And what did Kravitz say?" "Nothing. He just listened. Dante did all the talking." "Did money change hands?" "Not at the meeting. Dante told me later the plan was approved, that the money would come through the usual channels." "The usual channels being?" "Offshore accounts, wire transfers." Dante handled the details. The prosecutor made notes. "Did you ever see Kravitz again?" "Not that I know of. But if he looks that ordinary, I might have passed him on the street and never known it." "That's his genius. He hides in plain sight." The prosecutor stopped the video. "This footage connects you directly to Kravitz. It proves you were in the same room discussing criminal operations. That's going to be crucial for the case." Salvatore felt sick. He'd been in the same room with Victor Kravitz and never even known it. The man who now wanted him dead. The man whose empire Salvatore was helping to destroy. And Kravitz had been sitting right there, watching him, evaluating him, deciding whether Salvatore was useful or disposable. "Are we done for today?" Salvatore asked. "One more thing." The prosecutor pulled out a photo. Recent. High resolution, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It showed Celeste's apartment building, and standing on the sidewalk outside was a man in a dark jacket, watching the entrance. "We've identified this individual as Alexei Volkov," the prosecutor said. "He's a freelance contractor, works for the highest bidder, usually the Russian mob, but he's been known to take jobs from other organizations." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because he was photographed outside your son's current residence 3 days ago. He was there for 4 hours, watching, waiting." Salvatore's blood turned to ice. "You think he was sent to—" "We don't know. He left without making contact. But his presence suggests someone's keeping tabs on your family, most likely Kravitz." "You said Celeste and Luca were safe." "They are. We've increased surveillance. But you need to understand the stakes, Mr. Moretti. Victor Kravitz doesn't make threats. He makes examples. And if he thinks hurting your son will stop you from testifying, he'll do it. Then protect them." "We are. But protection has limits. The best way to keep them safe is to finish this case quickly. Give us everything we need to put Kravitz away before he makes a move." Salvatore stared at the photo, at the man standing outside Luca's building, a stranger who'd been paid to watch a 7-month-old baby, who might have been paid to do worse. "I want to see my son," Salvatore said, "in person, not through a video call." "That's not possible." "Make it possible. I just found out there's a hitman watching his building. I need to see him. I need to know he's safe." The prosecutor shook his head. "Any contact puts you both at risk." "I don't care about the risk. Set it up or I stop cooperating." "You can't—" "Watch me." Salvatore stood. "I've given you everything you asked for. Names, dates, connections. I sat in this room for 2 weeks answering questions while my son is being stalked by a contract killer. Now I want something in return." The prosecutor looked at Torres. Torres made a phone call, spoke quietly into the phone for a minute, then hung up. "One visit," Torres said. "Supervised. 30 minutes maximum. Tomorrow afternoon." "Where?" "Celeste's apartment. We'll clear the building, full security sweep, but you get 30 minutes and that's it." "Fine." "And Salvatore?" Torres's expression was hard. If anything goes wrong, if there's any indication this visit compromised security, we shut it down permanently. Understood? Understood. The next day felt like the longest of Salvatore's life. He couldn't eat, couldn't focus, just kept replaying the photo of Alexei Volkov standing outside Luka's building. A ghost in a dark jacket, watching, waiting for orders. Orders that might include hurting a baby to send a message. At 2 p.m., Torres and Chen drove Salvatore to Celeste's building. It was in a nice neighborhood in Brooklyn. Tree-lined streets, young families, the kind of place Salvatore used to look down on when he lived in the penthouse. Too quiet, too ordinary, too far from the centers of power. Now it looked like paradise. Federal agents had secured the building. Residents had been encouraged to stay inside. 2 agents were posted in the lobby. 2 more in the hallway outside Celeste's door. Torres knocked 3 times. A code. Celeste opened the door. She looked exhausted, hair pulled back, no makeup, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, nothing like the professional woman who'd appeared at the custody hearing. 30 minutes, she said, not to Salvatore, to Torres. 30 minutes, Torres confirmed. He gestured to Chen. We'll be right outside. Salvatore stepped into the apartment. It was small but clean, toys scattered across the living room floor. A baby swing in the corner. Photos on the walls. Most of them featuring Serafina, smiling, alive, young, before Salvatore had destroyed everything. He's in the nursery, Celeste said. Her voice was flat, empty, sleeping, but you can see him. She led Salvatore down a short hallway to a room painted soft yellow. Luka was in a crib by the window, curled on his side. He'd grown. His face had filled out, his hair was thicker, 8 months old now, almost unrecognizable from the premature baby Salvatore had held in the NICU. He's beautiful, Salvatore whispered. He looks like Serafina. Yeah, he does. Celeste stood in the doorway, arms crossed, defensive. Why are you really here, Salvatore? I wanted to see him. The prosecutors told me about the man watching the building. They said it might be connected to your case. It is. So you brought danger here. Again. Salvatore turned to face her. I didn't bring it. It followed me. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, the result is the same. My nephew is being watched by criminals because of choices you made. I'm trying to fix those choices. By testifying against more people? By making yourself an even bigger target? Celeste's voice rose. Luka stirred in the crib, but didn't wake. She lowered her voice. When does it end, Salvatore? When do you stop running from one crisis to the next and actually build something stable? That's what I'm trying to do. No. What you're trying to do is survive. That's not the same as living. Luka started crying. Soft at first, then louder. Celeste moved to the crib and lifted him out. The baby settled immediately against her shoulder. Comfortable. Safe. Salvatore felt something crack inside his chest. Can I hold him? He asked. Celeste hesitated, then nodded. Salvatore took Luka carefully. The baby was heavier than he remembered, stronger. He looked up at Salvatore with dark eyes, Serafina's eyes, and grabbed his shirt with tiny fists. Hey, buddy, Salvatore whispered. It's me, your dad. Luka made a sound. Not quite a word, just a babble, but it felt like the most important thing Salvatore had ever heard. I'm sorry I haven't been here, Salvatore continued. I'm sorry about everything, but I'm trying. I'm trying so hard to be the person you deserve. Luka yawned and rested his head on Salvatore's shoulder. Salvatore closed his eyes and just breathed, just existed in this moment. Father and son, together. For 30 minutes, that would have to last months. Time, Torres called from the hallway. Salvatore opened his eyes. Celeste was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. He needs you, she said quietly. Not just financially, not just as a name on his birth certificate. He needs an actual father, someone present, someone stable. I'm trying to be that person. Then finish the case. Testify. End the protection period. Come back to New York and actually fight for him. Celeste took Luka back. But if you can't do that, If this just turns into another excuse, then walk away. Don't torture him with visits and promises you can't keep. I'm not walking away. Then prove it. Torres knocked again. Salvatore, we need to go. Salvatore touched Luca's head one more time. I'll see you soon, buddy. I promise. He left before Celeste could respond, before he could second-guess himself, before the 30 minutes could stretch into something that hurt even worse. In the hallway, Torres looked at him. You okay? No. Good answer. They left the building through the back. No signs of Alexei Volkov or any other watchers. The street looked peaceful, normal, like nothing dangerous had ever happened here. But Salvatore knew better. Danger was patient, and Viktor Kravitz was the most patient man alive. The debriefings continued for another month. Salvatore gave them everything, every conversation he could remember, every detail about money flows and territory disputes and the organizational hierarchy that kept Kravitz insulated from direct criminal activity. The prosecutors built their case slowly, meticulously. Every piece of information Salvatore provided was verified, cross-referenced, corroborated with physical evidence or other witness testimony. By the end of the second month, they had enough. Brennan called a meeting. Same conference room, same fluorescent lights. But this time there was something different in her expression. Satisfaction. Maybe even excitement. We're ready to indict, she said. Salvatore felt his heart rate spike. When? Tomorrow. The grand jury meets at 9 a.m. We present our case. If they agree, and they will, we'll have an arrest warrant for Viktor Kravitz by noon. And then what? Then we execute the warrant, bring him in, arraign him, start the trial process. Brennan leaned forward. This is it, Mr. Moretti. This is what you've been working toward. Once Kravitz is indicted, your protection period officially ends. I can go home? Technically, yes, but I'd recommend staying in protection until after his arrest, just to be safe. How long will that take? A few days, maybe a week. Kravitz is careful. He might not be easy to find. Salvatore stood and walked to the window. The city looked the same as it had 2 months ago. Buildings, traffic, people living normal lives. Soon, he'd be one of them, or he'd be dead. What's my exposure after the indictment? Salvatore asked. Significant. Once Kravitz knows you cooperated, every resource he has will be pointed at you. We can offer ongoing protection, but it's not the same as witness protection. You'll be on your own more. And Luca? We'll maintain surveillance on Celeste's building, but again, our resources are limited. Salvatore turned around. So I testify. You get your indictment, Kravitz gets arrested, and then I'm just supposed to hope he doesn't send someone after me or my son before the trial? That's the reality of cooperation, Mr. Moretti. There are no guarantees. Except you guaranteed my safety if I cooperated. We guaranteed we'd do everything in our power to protect you. We never said it would be risk-free. Salvatore felt anger rising, the same anger that used to get people hurt when he had power. So what was the point of all this? I gave up everything, my empire, my home, my son, and for what? So you could build a case and then leave me exposed? The point was justice, Brennan said sharply. The point was putting a criminal kingpin in prison where he belongs. The point was making sure fewer people die because Viktor Kravitz thinks he's untouchable. She stood. You want guarantees? There are none. You want safety? It doesn't exist. What you get is the chance to do something that matters. To be someone better than the man who ignored his wife's phone calls while she was dying. That's what this was always about. The words hit like a physical blow. Salvatore wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself. But Brennan was right. About all of it. Fine, Salvatore said. Indict him tomorrow. I'll stay in protection until he's arrested. Smart choice. Brennan gathered her files. Torres will coordinate the logistics. Once Kravitz is in custody, you're free to go. She left without another word. Torres stayed behind. You did good work, Salvatore. Doesn't feel like it. It never does. Not until years later when you look back and realize you made a difference. I don't care about making a difference. I care about surviving long enough to see my son grow up. Then keep your head down and let us handle Kravitz. Torres headed for the door. It'll be over soon, but it wasn't over soon. The grand jury indicted Victor Kravitz the next morning. Arrest warrant issued at 11:47 a.m. Federal agents mobilized immediately. They raided 3 locations where Kravitz was known to operate. Found nothing. He'd vanished. His attorney appeared at the federal building that afternoon with a statement. Mr. Kravitz denies all charges and looks forward to defending himself in court. He'll surrender himself when arrangements can be made that respect his dignity and safety. Translation. Kravitz was in the wind and wasn't planning to make it easy. The days stretched into a week, then 2 weeks. No sign of him. No communication except through his lawyer, who kept filing motions and delaying tactics while his client stayed hidden. Salvatore remained in the Manhattan safe house, watched the news, checked his phone, waited for updates that never came. On the 16th day, Torres called him into a conference room. His expression was grim. "We have a problem," Torres said. "What kind of problem?" "We found Alexei Volkov, the contractor who was watching Celeste's building." "And?" "He's dead. Shot twice in the head. Professional execution. Body dumped in the East River." Salvatore's stomach turned. "Kravitz killed him?" "Probably. Covering his tracks. Anyone who could connect him to witness intimidation or threats against your family is being eliminated." "That's good, right? Means they can't hurt Luca. Or it means Kravitz is tying up loose ends before making his final move." Torres pulled out his phone, showed Salvatore a text message. "Unknown number, sent 2 hours ago. Tell Moretti he has 24 hours to recant his testimony. If he doesn't, there will be consequences." Salvatore read the message 3 times. "Is this real?" "We traced it to a burner phone purchased yesterday in Queens. We're treating it as credible." "What kind of consequences?" Torres didn't answer. Didn't need to. The message was clear enough. Recant or someone dies. Probably Salvatore. Maybe Luca. "What do I do?" Salvatore asked. "You don't do anything. We handle it. Increase your protection. Lock down Celeste's building. Find Kravitz before he can act." "And if you don't find him in time?" Torres met his eyes. "Then we hope the threat is just intimidation." "You don't believe that." "No, I don't." Salvatore stood, paced the room. His mind was racing. 24 hours. That was the deadline. 24 hours to decide if testifying was worth dying for. Worth Luca dying for. "I need to talk to Brennan," Salvatore said. "She's in trial, not available." "Make her available." "Salvatore." "Now!" Torres made the call. 10 minutes later, Brennan appeared on a video conference. She was in a courtroom somewhere, still wearing her suit, looking irritated at the interruption. "What's so urgent?" she asked. "I got a threat, 24 hours to recant my testimony or there will be consequences." "We're aware, we're handling it." "How?" "By finding Kravitz and arresting him before the deadline expires. And if you don't, then we protect you and your family to the best of our ability." "That's not good enough." "It's all we have." Salvatore felt something snap inside him. "No, it's not. You have one more option." "Which is?" "Let me go." Brennan frowned. "Excuse me?" "End my protection. Let me leave. I'll disappear on my own. Kravitz won't be able to find me and he'll have no reason to go after Luca." "That's suicide, Mr. Moretti." "It's survival. Kravitz wants me because I testified against him. If I disappear, his leverage disappears too. And your son stays with Celeste, safe, protected, without me as a target painted on his back." Brennan was silent for a moment. "You're suggesting we let you run, walk away from everything, break the cooperation agreement. I'm suggesting you let me do what I should have done months ago. Disappear, start over, actually protect my son instead of putting him in danger. If you run, the immunity revokes. We prosecute you on the original charges. Not if you can't find me." Brennan's expression hardened. "This is a mistake. It's the only move I have left." The video cut out. Torres stared at Salvatore. "You're serious?" "Completely." "Where will you go?" "I don't know. Far. Somewhere Kravitz can't reach. And Luca? He's better off without me. Celeste was right about that. She was right about all of it." Torres pulled out his phone, made another call, spoke quietly, hung up. "Brennan's considering it," Torres said. "But she wants something in exchange." "What?" One more testimony, on record. Everything you know about Kravitz, every detail, every conversation, every observation. We record it, seal it, use it as evidence, even if you're not physically present at trial. When? Now, tonight, before the 24-hour deadline expires. Salvatore looked at the clock on the wall. It was 8 p.m., 16 hours left. How long will it take? All night, maybe longer. And then I'm free? Then you're gone. We stop tracking you, stop protecting you, stop everything. You're on your own. Salvatore thought about Luca, about the visit to Celeste's apartment, about holding his son for 30 minutes and knowing it might be the last time. This was the final choice. Testify one more time and vanish, or refuse and watch everyone he loved become collateral damage in a war he'd started by trying to do the right thing. Get the recorder, Salvatore said. Let's finish this. The testimony lasted 11 hours. Salvatore sat in a windowless room in the federal building with 3 cameras pointed at him and a court stenographer recording every word. Torres stood in the corner. 2 prosecutors asked questions. Brennan watched from another room via live feed. They started with basic information. Salvatore's full involvement in the organization, how he'd met Dante, how the empire had been structured, who reported to whom, where the money came from, and where it went. Then they moved to Victor Kravitz. Every interaction Salvatore could remember. The restaurant meeting he'd forgotten until the surveillance footage reminded him. The way Dante had always deferred to someone unnamed on phone calls. The sudden shifts in strategy that seemed to come from nowhere but must have originated from Kravitz. The money that appeared in offshore accounts without explanation. Piece by piece, Salvatore connected the dots. Built the map. Handed them. Victor Kravitz wrapped in testimony and circumstantial evidence that might be enough to convict him even without Salvatore present in court. By 6 a.m., his voice was hoarse. His wrist ached. His eyes burned from the fluorescent lights. One more question, the lead prosecutor said. If you could say something directly to Victor Kravitz right now, what would it be? Salvatore looked at the camera. Imagine Kravitz watching this someday in a courtroom, or in a prison cell, or wherever men like him ended up when their empires finally collapsed. I'd tell him, I'm sorry, Salvatore said quietly. Not for testifying, but for ever being part of his world. For thinking that power and money and fear were what mattered. For choosing that life over the people I loved. He paused, and I'd tell him that he's already lost. Not because of this testimony, but because he built everything on a foundation that can't last. Empires fall. They always do. The only thing that survives is the damage they leave behind. The prosecutor nodded. Thank you, Mr. Moretti. We're done. The cameras turned off. The stenographer saved the file. Torres helped Salvatore stand. His legs were shaky from sitting so long. That was good work, Torres said. It was the truth. Same thing sometimes. Brennan appeared in the doorway. She looked tired but satisfied. The testimony is sealed. We'll use it at trial. You fulfilled your end of the agreement. So I can go? As soon as we finish the paperwork, you'll receive a new identity, cash stipend, basic documents to start over. After that, you're on your own. What about Luca? Celeste has been notified that you're leaving the program. She's agreed to maintain primary custody with the understanding that you'll have no contact until Kravitz is apprehended and the threat level decreases. Brennan handed him an envelope. Inside is a letter from our office, documenting your cooperation, your rehabilitation efforts, your commitment to your son's welfare. Use it when you're ready to apply for custody modification, assuming you survive long enough. Salvatore took the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have. How long before Kravitz is caught? Could be days, could be years. He's resourceful, but we'll get him eventually. And until then, you disappear. You stay disappeared. You don't contact anyone from your old life, not Celeste, not Luca, not even us. The moment you surface, Kravitz will find you. Understood. Brennan turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, Mr. Moretti, I think you made the right choice. Your son is safer with you gone. That's not easy to accept, but it's true. She left before he could respond. Torres led Salvatore to another room where a processing agent waited with documents. Birth certificate, social security card, driver's license, all with a different name. Michael Ross. Born in Ohio. No criminal record, no connection to organized crime. Just another middle-aged man trying to make a living. Memorize the details, the agent said. This is who you are now, forever. You can't go back to being Salvatore Moretti. That person is legally dead as far as witness protection is concerned. Salvatore studied the license. The photo was recent, but the face looked wrong, older, tired, like someone who'd lived too hard and lost too much. It was accurate. Where do I go? Salvatore asked. Wherever you want. We recommend the Midwest, small town. Somewhere you can blend in. Work low-profile jobs, stay invisible. What about money? 20,000 cash. Untraceable. That's your start. After that, you're on your own. The agent handed him a backpack. Inside were the documents, the cash, and a burner phone with Torres's number programmed in. Only call if Kravitz finds you, Torres said. Otherwise, we don't want to know where you are. Salvatore put on the backpack. It felt like carrying a gravestone. The death of Salvatore Moretti. The birth of Michael Ross. A new life built on the ashes of the old one. Can I... His voice cracked. Can I see him one more time? Before I go? Torres shook his head. Too risky. Kravitz's deadline expires in 6 hours. We need you gone before then. Just 5 minutes, please. Salvatore, I might never see him again. Just let me say goodbye. Torres looked at the agent. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Torres sighed. 5 minutes, supervised. And then you're gone. Bukhank. They drove to Celeste's building in an unmarked car. Dawn was breaking over Brooklyn. The streets were empty except for delivery trucks and early commuters. The federal agents had maintained surveillance on the building for weeks, but today felt different, heavier, like the calm before something terrible. Torres walked Salvatore to Celeste's door and knocked. She opened it immediately. She'd been awake, probably hadn't slept at all. 5 minutes, Torres said. Celeste nodded and let Salvatore inside. Luca was in the living room in his baby swing, 8 months old now, sitting up on his own, grabbing at toys, growing into a person with preferences and personality and a future that wouldn't include his father. Salvatore knelt beside the swing. Luca looked at him and smiled. Not recognition, just the general happiness babies showed to anyone who paid attention. Hey, buddy, Salvatore whispered. His throat was tight. I have to go away for a while, maybe a long while, and I need you to know something. Luca grabbed Salvatore's finger, the same grip he'd had in the NICU, weak but determined. I need you to know that everything I did, all the mistakes, all the terrible choices, I'm trying to fix them. Not for me, for you. So you can grow up safe. So you can have a life that isn't poisoned by what I was. Celeste stood in the doorway watching, silent. Her face was wet with tears she wasn't bothering to hide. Your mom wrote me a letter before she died, Salvatore continued. She told me I was given chances and I didn't take them. She was right. But you're my last chance, Luca. My last chance to be someone worth remembering. And I'm taking it, even if it means leaving you. He kissed Luca's forehead. The baby made a happy sound and grabbed Salvatore's shirt. I love you, Salvatore said. I know you can't understand that yet. But someday when you're older, I hope someone tells you, I hope Celeste tells you, that your dad loved you more than anything, more than power, more than safety, more than his own life. Torres appeared in the doorway. Time. Salvatore carefully removed Luca's hand from his shirt. The baby immediately reached for him again, started crying. The sound cut through Salvatore like a blade. I'm sorry, Salvatore whispered. I'm so sorry. He stood and walked to the door. Didn't look back. Couldn't look back. If he saw Luca crying, he'd never be able to leave. In the hallway, Celeste caught his arm. Wait. Salvatore turned. She handed him a small photo. It showed Serafina holding newborn Luca in the hospital. The photo must have been taken right before she died. She looked exhausted but happy, complete. She loved you, Celeste said quietly. Even at the end, even when she was writing that letter. She loved you and wanted you to be better. For yourself. For Luca. Don't waste that. Salvatore took the photo. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just survive. And come back when it's safe. Luca deserves to know his father. I don't know if I'll ever be able to come back. Then make sure it's worth it. Make sure disappearing actually means something. She wiped her eyes. Go. Before I change my mind and tell you to stay. Salvatore left before either of them could say anything else that would make leaving impossible. What? Torres drove him to a bus station in New Jersey, handed him a ticket to Indianapolis. From there, Salvatore, now Michael Ross, would be on his own. "Stay invisible," Torres said. "Get a job. Build a quiet life. Don't do anything that draws attention." "How will I know when it's safe?" "You won't. Not unless Kravitz gets arrested. And even then, his organization will still want revenge. You'll never be completely safe." "So this is it? Forever?" "Probably." Torres handed him a card, same one from months ago. "If you need emergency extraction, call this number. We'll come get you. But only if there's no other choice." Salvatore put the card in his wallet next to the photo of Serafina and Luca. Everything that mattered compressed into 2 pieces of paper. "Take care of them," Salvatore said. "Please." "We will. As long as Kravitz is out there, they'll have protection." "And after?" "After, they're just another family in Brooklyn, living normal lives. That's what you wanted, right?" "Yeah, that's what I wanted." Torres started to say something else, then stopped, just extended his hand. Salvatore shook it. "You did good, Salvatore. Most people don't get the chance to choose right after choosing wrong for so long. You took it. That counts for something." "Does it?" "Yeah, it does." Salvatore grabbed his backpack and walked into the bus station, bought coffee from a vending machine, sat on a plastic chair and waited for the Indianapolis bus that would take him to whatever came next. The station was nearly empty, a few travelers sleeping on benches, a janitor mopping floors, the ticket agent reading a newspaper behind bulletproof glass. Normal people living normal lives. Salvatore was one of them now. Just another passenger waiting for a bus. Just another face in the crowd. Invisible. Forgotten. Exactly how he needed to be. The bus arrived at 9 a.m. Salvatore boarded and found a seat in the back, watched through the window as New York disappeared behind him. All those buildings, all that power, all that history compressed into a skyline that got smaller with every mile. He fell asleep somewhere in Pennsylvania and didn't wake until Indiana. Done? Michael Ross found work at a warehouse in the suburbs of Indianapolis, loading trucks, moving boxes. The kind of labor that required muscle and endurance but no questions. He rented a studio apartment above a pharmacy, bought furniture from thrift stores, ate at diners where nobody knew his name. The first month was the hardest. Every stranger felt like a threat. Every unexpected sound made him reach for a weapon he no longer carried. Every night he dreamed about Luca crying and Serafina bleeding and Dante smiling behind a defendant's table. But slowly, painfully, Michael Ross became real. Not just a cover identity. An actual person with routines and coworkers and a landlord who complained about late rent. He worked mornings, spent afternoons at the library reading newspapers, checking headlines for any mention of Victor Kravitz. The man had still not been found. Still hiding, still dangerous. On the weekends, Michael went to a park and watched families. Parents pushing strollers, kids on playgrounds. The kind of normal life Salvatore Moretti had destroyed by choosing power over people. The kind of life Luca was living without him. 6 months passed, then a year. Michael's hands got calloused from warehouse work. His back ached from lifting boxes. His hair started showing gray. He was 42 but felt 70. Sometimes he took out the photo of Serafina and Luca, stared at it until his eyes blurred, tried to remember what Luca's voice sounded like, what his laugh had been, whether he'd said his first words yet. Michael would never know. That was the price. On a Tuesday in autumn, 1 year and 3 months after leaving New York, Michael was loading a truck when his supervisor called him over. "Phone call for you," the supervisor said. They said it was urgent. Michael's blood went cold. Nobody had this number. Nobody knew where he was, unless someone had found him. He took the call in the supervisor's office, closed the door, put the phone to his ear. "Hello?" "It's Torres." Michael's legs went weak. He sat down hard on the desk chair. "How did you find me?" "We've been monitoring, making sure you were okay. You did good, Michael. Stayed invisible." "Why are you calling?" "Because it's over. Victor Kravitz was arrested 3 days ago, Canada. He was trying to cross into Europe using a fake passport. Border agents flagged him. We brought him back. He's in custody awaiting trial." Michael couldn't speak for a moment, just held the phone and tried to process what he'd heard. He's really caught? He's caught, and he's not getting out. The evidence is overwhelming. Your testimony sealed it. He's looking at life without parole. What about the contracts, the people he hired? Most of them have been arrested or scattered. The organization is dismantled. There's still some danger, there always is, but the threat level has decreased significantly. Michael closed his eyes. So I can come back? If you want to, but you need to understand something. You're still Michael Ross. Salvatore Moretti is legally dead. You can't just resurrect him without consequences. What kind of consequences? Legal complications, media attention. The families you testified against might come after you even with Kravitz in prison. It's safer to stay Michael Ross. Build a new life here. What about Luca? Torres was quiet for a moment. Celeste knows about the arrest. She's been informed that the threat level has decreased. Whether she allows contact is up to her. But legally, you're still Michael Ross. You have no parental rights to a child whose father is legally deceased. So I gave up everything for nothing. You gave up everything to keep him safe. That's not nothing. That's what parents do. Michael pressed his forehead against the desk. He wanted to scream, wanted to break something, wanted to demand that the system give him back what he'd sacrificed. But the system didn't work that way. It never had. There's one more thing, Torres said. Celeste sent something. She asked me to forward it to you if we ever made contact. What is it? A video. I'm sending it to this phone now. A minute later, Michael's phone buzzed. He opened the video file. It showed Luca, almost 2 years old now, walking, talking, playing with blocks in Celeste's apartment. His hair had grown darker. His face had lost the baby softness. He looked like Serafina. He looked like Salvatore. He looked beautiful. The video was only 30 seconds. At the end, Celeste's voice came through off camera. Say hi to Daddy. Luca looked at the camera and waved. Hi, Daddy. The video ended. Michael watched it 17 times, memorized every frame, every gesture, every syllable of those 2 words. Hi, Daddy. His son remembered him, or at least remembered the concept of him, remembered there was someone called Daddy who existed somewhere even if he wasn't there. You still there? Torres asked. Yeah, I'm here. What do you want to do? Michael looked around the supervisor's office, at the warehouse through the window, at the life he'd built as Michael Ross. Quiet, safe, invisible, empty. I want to see him, Michael said. Even if it's just once, even if Celeste only gives me an hour. I need to see him. I'll talk to her, no promises, but I'll try. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Seeing him might be harder than staying away. I know. Torres hung up. Michael sat in the office for a long time. The supervisor eventually knocked on the door asking if everything was okay. Michael said yes and went back to loading trucks. But his mind was 3 states away in a Brooklyn apartment where his son was learning to walk and talk and become a person. A person Salvatore Moretti would never know. But maybe Michael Ross could. The meeting happened 2 months later. Neutral location, a park in Philadelphia, halfway between New York and Indianapolis. Federal agents nearby but out of sight. Michael arrived first, sat on a bench near a playground and watched children play. His hands were shaking. He'd barely slept in days, kept imagining what he'd say, how Luca would react, whether the child would even recognize him after 2 years. Celeste appeared at noon pushing a stroller. Luca was walking beside her holding her hand. He was bigger than in the video, more solid, more real. When he saw the playground, he pulled away from Celeste and ran toward the swings. Michael stood. Celeste saw him and stopped. They looked at each other across 20 feet of grass and 2 years of silence. She walked over slowly. Hi, she said. Hi. You look different. I am different. Good different or just different? I don't know yet. They stood awkwardly, strangers who shared the most important person in their lives. Thank you for coming, Michael said, for letting me see him. I almost didn't. I spent weeks arguing with myself about whether this was a good idea. What changed your mind? He keeps asking about you, where Daddy is, when Daddy's coming home. I didn't know how to answer, so I figured maybe you should answer for yourself. Michael looked at Luca. The child was climbing on the jungle gym, fearless, confident, everything a 2-year-old should be. Does he remember me? I show him photos, tell him stories, he knows who you are. Whether he remembers you as a person or just as a concept, I can't say. Can I? 5 minutes. That's what I agreed to with Torres. 5 minutes today. Then we'll see. Michael walked toward the playground. His legs felt unstable, like he was approaching something sacred that might break if he got too close. Luca was at the top of the jungle gym. He saw Michael and tilted his head, curious but not afraid. "Hi," Michael said. His voice sounded strange, too high, too eager. "Do you remember me?" Luca stared at him, then shook his head. "That's okay. Michael stopped. He wasn't Salvatore, not anymore. "I'm a friend of your Aunt Celeste." "She's not my aunt. She's my mom." The words hit harder than Michael expected. He glanced at Celeste. She was watching from the bench. Her expression was unreadable. "Right, sorry, your mom." "Are you Daddy?" Michael's throat closed. "Yeah, I'm Daddy." "Where did you go?" "I had to go away for a while to keep you safe." "From what?" "From bad people." "Are the bad people gone now?" "Most of them." Luca climbed down from the jungle gym, stood in front of Michael, studying him with Serafina's dark eyes. "You look sad," Luca said. "I am sad. Because I miss you." "I miss you too." "Mom shows me pictures. You look different in pictures." "I was different then." "Are you better now?" The question was so direct, so innocent, so impossibly complicated. "I'm trying to be," Michael said. Luca nodded, then held up his arms. "Can you push me on the swing?" Michael looked at Celeste. She nodded. He lifted Luca, so much heavier than he remembered, and carried him to the swing set. Strapped him in carefully, started pushing, gentle at first, then higher when Luca demanded it. "Higher, Daddy, higher!" Michael pushed, watched his son laugh, watched him fly. For 5 minutes, nothing else existed except this. Father and son, together. Finally. When the time was up, Celeste approached. "We need to go," she said gently. Luca protested, but Celeste was firm. Michael lifted him out of the swing. The child wrapped his arms around Michael's neck. "Don't go," Luca whispered. "I have to, but I'll come back. I promise." "When?" Michael looked at Celeste. She sighed. "We'll figure it out," she said. "Maybe next month, same place." "Can I bring my trucks?" "Sure, bring your trucks." Celeste took Luca's hand and led him away. The child waved over his shoulder. Michael waved back until they disappeared into the parking lot. Then he sat on the bench and cried for the first time since leaving New York. Torres appeared from somewhere and sat beside him. Didn't say anything, just handed him a tissue and waited. "He called her Mom," Michael said finally. "Kids adapt. It's how they survive." "She's doing a better job than I ever could." "Probably, but that doesn't mean he doesn't need you, too." "For what? 5-minute visits in random parks?" "For showing him that people can change, that mistakes don't define you, that trying matters even when it's hard." Torres stood. "You did the hardest thing a parent can do, Salvatore. You let go. Most people never learn that." "I'm not Salvatore anymore." "No, you're Michael Ross. And Michael Ross is a better man than Salvatore Moretti ever was. Remember that." Torres left him alone on the bench. Michael sat there until the sun started setting, watched families leave the playground, watched the swings go still, watched the shadows grow long. Then he stood and walked to his car. He had a long drive back to Indianapolis, back to the warehouse and the studio apartment and the quiet life of Michael Ross. But next month he'd drive back to Philadelphia, push Luca on the swings again, maybe bring trucks to play with, maybe build something that looked like redemption. 1 5-minute visit at a time. 3 years later, Michael Ross sat in a family court in Brooklyn. Celeste sat across the aisle. Luca, 5 years old now, was with a court-appointed guardian in another room. Michael's lawyer was presenting evidence. 3 years of consistent visits, child support payments, birthday cards, photos documenting a relationship rebuilt slowly and carefully, letters from Celeste supporting increased custody. Testimony from therapists confirming Luca benefited from having both parental figures in his life. The judge reviewed everything, looked at Michael, looked at Celeste. "Mr. Ross," the judge said, "or should I say Mr. Moretti?" "Ross, Your Honor, legally. The court is aware of your history, your cooperation with federal authorities, your time in witness protection, your efforts to rebuild your life." She paused. "This is an unusual situation." "Yes, Your Honor. But the evidence suggests you've made genuine efforts to be present for your son. Ms. Rodriguez agrees, the therapist agrees, and most importantly, Luca wants more time with his father." Michael's heart was pounding. "Therefore, I'm granting joint physical custody. Week on, week off arrangement. Pending review in 6 months. If this continues to benefit the child, we'll make it permanent." The gavel came down. Michael couldn't breathe. Joint custody, real custody. Not 5-minute visits in parks, actual days and nights with his son. Celeste was crying. Happy tears this time. She walked over and hugged him. "Don't screw this up," she whispered. "I won't." "I know. That's why I supported it." They brought Luca into the courtroom. He ran to Michael and wrapped his arms around his waist. "Do I get to stay at your place now, Dad?" "Yeah, buddy. Every other week." "Can we get pizza?" "We can get whatever you want." Luca smiled. Serafina's smile. Pure and uncomplicated. "I love you, Dad." Michael knelt down, looked his son in the eyes. "I love you too. More than anything." "Even more than trucks?" "Even more than trucks." Luca laughed and ran back to Celeste to tell her about the pizza plan. Michael stood. His lawyer was shaking his hand, saying something about paperwork and scheduling. But Michael wasn't listening. He was watching his son, alive, happy, safe. Everything Salvatore Moretti had sacrificed for, everything Michael Ross had earned. That night, Michael took Luca back to his apartment in Brooklyn. Not the penthouse, not the safe house, just a modest 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. The walls were covered with Luca's drawings. The refrigerator was stocked with juice boxes and chicken nuggets. They ate pizza on the couch and watched cartoons. Luca fell asleep against Michael's shoulder halfway through the 2nd episode. Michael carried him to bed, tucked him in. Sat in the chair beside the bed like he'd done 3 years ago in the apartment he could barely afford. This time felt different. This time wasn't stolen minutes or supervised visits. This was home. Michael pulled out the photo of Serafina and Luca from the hospital. He'd kept it all these years. Through safe houses and warehouse jobs and lonely nights in Indiana. Through everything. "I finally did it," he whispered to the photo. "I became the man you needed me to be. It took losing everything. It took years, but I got there." He put the photo on Luca's nightstand, right next to a toy truck and a drawing of the 3 of them, Dad, Luca, and Aunt Celeste, standing in a park under a smiling sun. Michael turned off the light and left the door cracked open, walked to the living room, poured himself water, stood at the window looking out at Brooklyn. The city looked different now. Not an empire to conquer, not a prison to escape. Just a place where people lived, where families built lives, where second chances sometimes arrived even when you didn't deserve them. Michael Ross had been given a second chance, not by the courts, not by federal protection, but by his son, by Celeste, by every person who'd believed that change was possible, even after everything that had been broken. He'd spent 15 years building a criminal empire that collapsed in a single night. Now he was spending every day building something better. Something that couldn't be taken away by federal raids or custody hearings or contracts from men who wanted him dead. He was building a relationship with his son. One bedtime story at a time, one pizza dinner at a time, one week-on, week-off arrangement that felt like salvation. It wasn't the empire Salvatore Moretti had dreamed of. It was smaller, quieter, built on love instead of fear. But it was real. And it was his. And it was enough. In the bedroom, Luca stirred in his sleep, made a small sound. Michael walked back to check on him. The child had kicked off his blankets. Michael pulled them back up. Luca grabbed his hand without waking. The same grip he'd had in the NICU. Weak but determined, holding on because he didn't have anyone else. Because his mother was dead and his father was a stranger trying to become something worth holding on to. Michael sat on the edge of the bed and didn't move, didn't pull away. Just stayed there in the dark while his son slept and held his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Outside, New York kept moving. New empires rose. New criminals chased power. New people made the same mistakes Salvatore Moretti had made, choosing wrong until there was nothing left to choose. But inside this small apartment in Brooklyn, under soft yellow light that leaked through the cracked door, Michael Ross was no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer trying to be someone he wasn't. He was simply a father, imperfect, flawed, still learning, still earning the title every single day. And for the first time since the night Serafina died, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.